Chapter 1983. Hey, is someone trying to whitewash the goblins? Come on. Saying that the goblins were actually all saints, a race that performed glorious feats in order to save the people who were struggling in misery. Ugh. Alright, even Duque couldn't make it up anymore. As an organization that prided itself on justice, the Alliance was sincerely opposed to genocide. Every time a tribe was destroyed, there would be a group of people who were spiritually tribal, jumping out to complain, and most of them were clergymen. Perhaps this group of brainless people thought that Duque was too easy to talk to, and always forgot that Duque was a demigod. They thought that their boss was the holy light, the Naru, and that Duque and they couldn't even pee in the same pot. Since they couldn't even pee in the same pot, why would Duque care about them? With a direct order, these noisy people were forcibly recruited to the front line, and then in the mopping up battle, they were chopped by the remnants of the traditional tribes who couldn't even read and could only speak the orc language with axes. As for the goblins, no one really whitewashed them. Even the Holy Light Church wouldn't pity these bastards. It was said that the church would receive hundreds of reports every season, saying that the goblins themselves or sent people to steal money from the church's donation box using magnets. Those brainless people would tie magnets with ropes and suck the money up from the opening of the donation box. Duque thought back to the goblin player in the game who was also like that. How the hell did he find out that he was sold as a slave right after coming out, and by his own boss, Galavix? So, the goblins that angered everyone in the world were wiped out just like that. The Alliance wiped out all the goblins that were under a meter tall and had 5 short limbs. Interestingly, after the Alliance announced the policy that as long as they brought the corresponding number of goblin heads, the goblin employees of other races would not be held accountable, the ones who killed the goblins the most were the employees who had been employed, by the goblins. This really led to the collapse of the hot sand conglomerate and the venture capital corporation. In just 3 months, the evil, supposedly neutral, race of goblins was wiped out just like that. The speed was even faster than the speed of wiping out the remaining orcs. On the other hand, among the beastmen, there was actually an organized clan that had escaped. Thrall had married Agna during the cataclysm. She was a shaman of the Frostwolf clan and a traditional Maghan orc with healthy brown skin. When Sar was supposed to have died in the volcanic eruption of Orgrimmar, she led the Frostwolf clan hiding in Razor Swamp, taking advantage of the chaos when the Alliance was clearing out the Horde, through a long secret passage unknown to the Alliance, all the way into the Thousand Needles, and then turned into the dense forest area of Feralas. Perhaps Sal had already prepared an escape route, or was it Agna's judgment? It didn't matter anymore. Given that the Alliance had Oro's descendants, these powerful earth-boring bugs, Agna's Frostwolf tribe was like a grasshopper after autumn. They wouldn't be able to last long. If he caught Agna, he would know everything. Even so, the Throne Conference officially announced the end of the war and set the following 1st of January as the Victory Day. This day happened to be the first day of the 30 years of the Dark Portal. It was ironic that the year when the Dark Portal opened and the Alliance was established was the first year of the Dark Portal. That year, it was the day when the Horde invaded Azeroth and set off the flames of war throughout the Eastern Kingdom. 30 years later, Duque, who had a part in establishing the Alliance, personally ended all of this. With a start and an end, such a founder of the Alliance was more trustworthy. Woken met Duque in private at the Duke's mansion in Stormwind City. He didn't beat around the bush and asked directly, "I know that it will be quite embarrassing for me to ask the following questions in my current position. And it is likely to cause you displeasure, but I still want to." Before Woken could finish, he was interrupted by Duque. "About the orc captives?" "Yes." Woken was a little disappointed. Duque glanced at Woken. Really, Duque admired Woken's courage and the friendship between him and Thrall. Whether the trolls could stay in the Alliance or not was decided by Duque's words. If a member of the first group of members proposed an expulsion motion, then as long as 2/3 of the members voted in favor, they could be directly expelled from the Alliance. With the situation of the trolls, it was really easy to get them to leave. Even so, Woken took a huge risk and came to ask Duque. Sigh. Duque sighed. Even if the Horde was weaker than the Alliance, it was still a behemoth. Duque dug countless pits and assassinated the Horde countless times, but in the end he succeeded in destroying the Horde. He could launch a massacre against the notorious goblins, but he couldn't publicly order the orcs not to be captured. All the alienated orcs who drank the Yashiji Blackheart water were killed. However, the efficiency of the Horde was simply terrible. The Kukaran guards were all sent out, but the work of feeding the elixir to the orc civilians was still too slow. In Duque's vision, of course, it would be best if all the orcs became alienated orcs so that the Alliance would have an excuse to kill the orcs. But knowing that there was a threat like Yashiji, the alliance didn't have much reason to delay. The result was that the alliance successfully destroyed the Orthodox horde and bombed Orgrimmar to the point where it could never be rebuilt. It also gave various hints to the military to let the soldiers kill. Even so, the alliance still captured nearly 200,000 orcs, most of whom were women and children. When they were captured, these women and children were being forced by the Kukuran guards to Orgrimmar to drink Yashiji Blackheart water. It could be foreseen that as the war continued, this number would get higher and higher. The order to kill women and children could be used on the goblins but not on the orcs. After all, the orcs had cooperated with the alliance in many wars, such as in the Silithus Desert, when they fought with the alliance against the Karaj bug people who belonged to Si Thun at the time. Although the orcs were abominable, they were often devils, but they also had an angel side. It was this state of conflict that made the leaders of the alliance worried. The alliance is the alliance. The alliance will never kill prisoners of war. Duque's words first made Wujin's heart rise to the clouds, and then stepped on his heart to hell with the next sentence. But the alliance will not bear the cost of food and accommodation of hundreds of thousands of captives for no reason. That is a great waste of manpower, money and materials, so I plan to exile all the horde prisoners. Exile? Wujin's eyes widened in an instant, and he immediately understood. Draenor is being destroyed, isn't that asking them to die? Duque's mouth curled into a slightly cruel smile. I have to correct you. Draenor is being destroyed, not already destroyed. Chapter 1984. Woken was speechless. Duque continued. As a civilized and intelligent race, even in the first battle of the Dark Portal 30 years ago, the Horde slaughtered so many towns and villages in Stormwind, but they didn't kill all the captives. Although it was a bit inhumane for King Tyrrhenas of Lordaeron to make the orcs slave gladiators, he didn't kill the captives. Since the Alliance doesn't intend to do that, it's at least giving the orcs a way out. 5 years ago, Draenor was definitely too crowded for nearly 3 million orcs. They had to eliminate themselves according to tradition. For less than 300,000 orcs, that place is still very spacious. Besides, as long as there is another amazing guy like Ghoul Dan among the orcs, they can still go to other planets. Of course, we won't hand over control of the Dark Portal to the orcs. There were also some things that Duque wouldn't tell Woken, such as installing a batch of bombs in Nagran that could blow up the entire Nagran region. If they wanted to make a giant bomb with the goal of blowing up a planet, this method was obviously not reliable. It would be much easier to lower the target and change it to a second collapse strike on the already destroyed Draenor. Duque had already studied the geological structure of Draenor. Without the core and other things, Draenor purely relied on gravity waves that could not be explained by science at this stage to attract the air on the surface. The geological structure of the entire Draenor continent was far more fragile than most people thought. The void was destroying the land of Draenor, and at the same time, it was sucking away the air, water, and various nutrients on the continent. This made the land of Draenor like a crispy biscuit. Not to mention hitting it with a stick, even a little bit of force could cause the whole continent to collapse. In fact, the collapse of Draenor was a non-linear acceleration process. When the collapse occurred more than 50% of the original collapse, the speed of the collapse would accelerate exponentially. The Burning Legion could no longer use the orcs to invade Azeroth. Once they were discovered by Duque, all the orcs would be sent to heaven with a bang. As for whether the orcs would really go to heaven, it would depend on their luck. Duque was already very kind not to order the slaughter of the orcs. Woken did not say anything. He bowed deeply, "Thank you for your kindness." When he looked up again, Duque found that Woken was smiling. This was the first time Wujin had smiled since he joined the Alliance, although the troll smile was always a bit creepy. "What? No, I and the tribe. I can finally let go of all my attachment and reluctance. Next, if the Alliance wants the Darkspear trolls to contribute their full strength, I think the Darkspear trolls will be happy to do so." Wujin chuckled. What about before? Forget the hypocritical politician pleasantries. Trolls aren't good at that. To be honest, it was more out of helplessness before. Walker shrugged. Because the troll's arms were too long, the shrug seemed a little exaggerated. "Go get ready. The jungles of Pandaria need you." The Pandaria continent was dominated by jungles and mountainous terrain. Previously, Brainless Roar had released a bunch of orcs from a small tribe there, but he didn't bring them back when he left. After all, he still wanted to occupy the fertile land of Pandaria. This batch of orcs was only a few thousand, which was not much. It was good to invest in the Night Elves, but it was better to not let the Darkspear trolls be idle. Moreover, this was also a proof of allegiance. On the other side, after the alliance officially announced the end of the war and set January 1st as Victory Day, a grand victory and celebration ceremony for 7 consecutive days, the people of the alliance were excited. Oh, we won. The damn tribe is finally finished. Long live the alliance. On the 4 continents of Azeroth, in the taverns of every alliance territory, the boss made the same decision: free beer today. La 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 la. In the taverns, in the streets and alleys, there were revelers everywhere. They raised their beer bottles high, drank to their heart's content, shouted and toasted and hugged every alliance member they bumped into. Even the most serious alliance army, the Throne Conference, ordered. After the necessary security forces were arranged, non-duty officers and soldiers were allowed to celebrate, but the guards must not make any mistakes. Smiles weaved on the faces of every alliance person. Tears also hung at the corners of the eyes of every alliance person who had lost friends and family. Without the need for organization, all the cemeteries outside the cities were quickly filled with people who came to visit the graves. A simple flower that was picked by the roadside. One of the most common white candles. It was filled with the grief of the living for the dead. That, do you understand? The alliance won and the tribe was finally destroyed. Your soul in heaven can rest in peace. A one-armed middle-aged man in military uniform used his remaining hand to caress the unusually smooth tombstone that had no edges. Mom, I survived. I followed your wishes. I gave birth to many children. Jeff and John gave birth to grandchildren for you. Unfortunately, Tommy died in the 3rd Battle of the Dark Portal. A woman in her 50s sobbed in front of the tombstone. Child, light a candle for your granduncle. If he didn't block the orc's axe for me, there wouldn't be you and your father. An old man pointed at his grandson. It had been 30 years. The long war had created so many tragedies. From the invasion of the orcs, to the Scourge army wreaking havoc, to the arrival of the Burning Legion, to the rampaging dragons, to the elemental lords and the ancient gods causing destruction, the people of Azeroth, especially the people of the Alliance, had suffered too much. Although everyone knew that the Burning Legion would return within 10 years, at least the complete destruction of the tribe represented the end of an era, as well as the end of a grudge. The days had to continue. The survivors of that year hugged each other and fell asleep in relief. From the 2nd day onwards, it was the real celebration and revelry. The official Victory Day announced by the Alliance was the 1st of January. But before that, the people had spontaneously started a large-scale celebration. Countless ideas for celebration were created, and it also inspired countless poets and singers to write. Duque waved his hand and had the troops that had been assembled but not sent out move out to participate in the Battle of Kalimdor and the Pandaria continent to wipe out the remaining enemies. Instead, 90% of the troops that had participated in the battle were replaced. The people rushed to the various airports and seaports, quietly waiting for the return of each batch of warriors, giving them the most fanatical cheers. People sent flowers, wine, lofty praises, and hot kisses from young girls. The damn war was finally over, even if it was temporary. Chapter 1985. With Duque's help, Azeroth finally had an express. Although he had learned from the Great Celestial Empire that all news or reports that had been circulated for more than 100 copies had to be approved by the Alliance News Bureau, it was still an improvement. Almost every day at 3 o'clock in the morning, over 300,000 copies of newspapers would be printed in the major cities of the Alliance and transported to the cities and towns of the Alliance by train and regular airship flights. In the Azeroth Daily, a writer wrote, "The legendary peace has not appeared on the land of Azeroth for 30 years. Our people and soldiers are either at war or preparing for war. No one knows what kind of enemy will come next year or tomorrow. At least this time the war between the Alliance and the Horde has come to an end. Thank you, our greatest hero and commander of the Alliance, Duke Marcus. Look at his achievements. He led more than 10 kingdoms and races out of the quagmire of war. He used his genius ideas and realizable inventions to arm the entire Alliance army. He also promoted the Alliance's economy and revived several countries that had long been destroyed in the flames of war. 30 years ago, when our parents and grandparents were still using the most primitive plows to plow the land, eating black bread that looked like wood dregs and vegetables and fruits that were full of moths, our ancestors were still using the most primitive plows to farm. Who would have thought that 30 years later, not only would our lives not be destroyed by the flames of war, but we would also be able to eat all kinds of bread and snacks, fresh fruits and vegetables, and live a more luxurious lifestyle than the nobles of 30 years ago. It took the ancestors of the Rin family in Stormwind almost 3 years to reach today's Stormwind city from Torrential Castle. But now, an ordinary worker only needed to work for 3 days to buy an airship ticket from Riptide Castle to Stormwind City. We'll reach our destination in another 3 days. Tourism, what an extravagant word. In the 2,800 years of human history, the term tourism was born for the first time. Because in the past 3,000 years, leaving any inhabited area meant danger and death. Only the bravest hunters or swordsmen would step on the land outside the villages and towns alone. And now, no dangerous creature can be found within 5 kilometers of any Alliance settlement with more than 1,000 people. The Alliance isn't born noble and destined to be great. In the first 15 years of the Alliance was purely a military organization that fought wars against foreign enemies and political games against internal enemies. It was only after Duke Marcus came to power that the Alliance was built into a pan-racial military, economic, and political organization. That's why the Allied nations today encompass the 4 continents of Azeroth. Praise the Alliance. Praise Duke Marcus. At least before our great leader retires from the mortal world, there is no need to worry about the collapse of the world. Just as Sir Marcus said, the Burning Legion is destined to make a comeback. That's not important. We believe that under the leadership of our leader, even the powerful Burning Legion will one day become the most magnificent chapter in the history of the Alliance. Let's celebrate our victory. At the same time, get ready for a new challenge. Jaina finished reading the newspaper and threw it aside. Yo Duque, the newspaper is praising you so much. Yes, praise me more. Duque shamelessly replied while hugging Tyrants but and madly attacking with Duque's divine sword. After the war, Duque's harem became idle, and Duque also got busy. After defeating Tyrant, he entered a short period of time as a sage and Duque spoke. Sai, you women are so strange. You're clearly immortal, forever 18 years old. Why do you have to make a child? Duke had only said one sentence when he was attacked by the harem and spat on. This is the inheritance of life. A woman without a child is not a complete woman. Even the businesswoman Jaina cupped her face. Sai, seeing that everyone has a child, I suddenly want one too. Yes, perhaps this is the so-called herd effect. Everyone does it and I want to do it too. Alicia nodded in agreement. Ugh, I've seen so many dead people during the Qingming festival, but I've never wanted to die. Duque complained. What are you pretending for? Queen Sylvie, who had been groaning and gasping for breath after being beaten up by Duke, suddenly unleashed her might and kicked Duke away with a lightning-fast kick. Whoa, yes, the Qingming festival was not the main point. If Duque could create a Valentine's Day, he could create a Qingming festival too. The main point was that this might be the last peaceful period. No one could say for sure if they could withstand the Burning Legion's attack. If it was a one-sided battle, it would be better if they did not die. No matter who won or lost, it would be a relief. What they were most afraid of was an 8-year war, or even a war that would last for several centuries. After the war, those who were supposed to have children had all been born, but how many were left? Not to mention Jaina and Alicia, even Tyron was tempted. Duque looked at the harem that he had single-handedly built. It was upgraded from being surrounded by beauties to a kindergarten, from a small class to a small class, and then to a large class. Just thinking about it made him feel a little hopeless. Women were creatures. Once they had children, men could be thrown aside. Thinking about how gentle and caring Aurelia and Sasha were in the past, but now. Sorry, her daughter was first, she was second, and you, Duque, third. Duque had an ominous feeling that he was about to become the third person in a group. Tyron came over and caught Duque's sword with one hand. Yo. Aren't you very powerful? Since you have the ability to deal with us, you should satisfy our wish to have children. Wait. What about Elun? Elun allowed it. Seeing Jaina, Alicia, and Tyron surround him, Duque lamented in his heart. Even with tears in her eyes, he had to take responsibility for the girls he had sex with. The only thing that Duque was glad about was that humans did not seem to get along with the Draenei and dragons. But when he became a true god, these problems would no longer be a problem. For the first time, Duque did not want to become a true god. It was finally the 1st of January in the 30th year of the Dark Portal. The Alliance celebrated the annihilation of the Horde and held a grand victory ceremony in New Lordaeron City. At the same time, they commemorated the 30th anniversary of the opening of the Dark Portal and the 30th anniversary of the Alliance. Strictly speaking, the Alliance was not even 30 years old. After all, the Alliance was only formed at the end of the first year of the Dark Portal. But who would care about such a happy day? Chapter 1986. Lordaeron in this life was not destroyed by the orcs like in history, but it did not escape Arthas's attack either. History had changed too much. Queen Cia did not become an immortal, and Anastrian did not defend Lordaeron. As a result, Lordaeron did not change its name to Undercity. Queen Kalia had been on the throne for 15 years. On the surface, she ruled by doing nothing, and openly admitted that she was a mascot. Lordaeron's authority was magically divided into two parts. Most of the military power was in the hands of High Lord Mograine and the military nobles led by the Abendis family. To be precise, the current leader of the military was Brigid Abendis, the daughter of the former Supreme General Abendis, who was now missing. However, perhaps it was because King Tarinas had controlled the Silver Hand, so the Silver Hand Knights under Kalia's instructions became a strange existence. It was fully funded by Lordaeron but had autonomy. It could recruit people independently from the Lordaeron military, and it was a strange existence that fought independently. The most interesting thing was that the economy of the entire Lordaeron was strictly controlled by Elugia. Queen Alterac held the position of Lordaeron's deputy finance minister, which was the only one in the world. This was Duque's economic circle. But no one could say that Elugia was not one of them. Under Elugia single-handedly, in just 15 years Lordaeron, which was originally very strong, became terrifyingly rich. In the end, no one knew how rich Lordaeron was. Anyway, according to the current military expenditure, Elugia had prepared enough military expenditure for them for 10 years. The accounts were open, the funds were clear, and the gold in the inventory could be checked at any time. Of course, the richest could no longer be considered as the traditional three families, Alterac, Kurtiras, and the Marcus family. The richest organization was now the Alliance. Every 4 years, or when new members joined, the Alliance would review the military expenditure, the number of troops, and the distribution of armaments. In principle, the stronger countries were obliged to contribute more money, manpower, and resources. This was an obligation. The opposite of an obligation was also a right. For example, when conquering a new territory, the stronger countries that fulfilled their obligations had the right to get better land and gain more spoils of war. With the Alliance's consecutive victories, even if they had to pay a large amount of compensation and war dividends according to the Alliance's strict rules, the countries would still be able to make a profit. It was more like a snowball that was getting bigger and bigger. This time, when they heard that they were going to attack the Horde, all the countries became extremely excited and clamored for their own countries or races to send more troops. More investment meant dividends. Now comes the harvest season. There was actually no direct benefit to destroying the Orthodox tribes. After all, Du Roder and the Barren Lands, the two traditional territories of the Barren Lands, were quite poor, and the minerals they produced were mostly low-grade copper and tin. But it was different if they destroyed the rich and heartless goblins. The Rusty Water Conglomerate, the Venture Capital Company, and the Hot Sand Group, these three companies were King rich. This time the Alliance was ruthless. They announced early in the morning that if the employees did not betray them, kill them, or report their bosses for hiding the money, the employees would also be sentenced to death. Goblins wanted money even after they died. Many of the employees weren't gnomes. If they lost their lives, what was the use of money? In addition, the goblin tycoons, giants, and trade princes were all stained with blood. Every coin in their coffers was flowing with the smell of blood. If you successfully report your boss illegal gains, the Alliance will give 1% of the total amount as a tax-free bonus after confiscating the illegal gains of the goblins. This will reward the informant and guarantee the privacy of the informant. This policy became a fatal blow to all the goblins. Not to mention the employees of other races who reported the goblins. Even if they knew that the Alliance wanted to kill all the goblins, there were still many bitter goblins who continued to report with the mentality of wanting their bosses to die first. As of December 30th, the Alliance had seized an astronomical amount of wealth from the goblins. How much was it? Well, compared to the total of more than 20 countries and organizations in the Alliance in 29 years, it was about 100 times. It sounded exaggerated, but considering that this was the accumulation of countless black-hearted goblins for thousands of years, it was not surprising. It was ironic that when the Alliance's troops were at the gates, several major trade princes were only willing to take out 1,000th of the money from their coffers to reward and boost morale. They even spent 1,000th of the money to bribe the high-ranking officials and generals of the Alliance. This reminded Du Ku of the Chongzhen Emperor of the Ming dynasty. Those ministers whose hearts were rotten to the bone, when Li Zicheng's troops were at the gates, the emperor asked them to donate some money to boost morale, but no one was willing to fork out any money, as if whoever did was an idiot. In the end, the roaming king broke into the imperial capital and killed all the officials and rich families. It was only then that the group of idiots cried out in fear and begged for mercy. Unfortunately, it was too late. History was always shockingly similar. The goblins were greedy for money, and they were indeed unrepentant. The funny thing was that there were enemies in this world that money couldn't deal with. For example, people like Duque who didn't care about money. To be precise, Duque only cared about the lives of the goblin trade princes and all their money. No matter how stubborn the goblins were, they couldn't withstand the soul torture of the Eridar Gemini. In just a few moments they even poured out the goblin girls that they had peeped on bathing when they were young. This huge sum of money caused a huge commotion among the higher-ups of the Alliance. Not to mention the other leaders, even a boorish man like William was excited. Duque stopped them, that's right. According to the laws of the Alliance, this huge sum of money is undoubtedly the spoils of war. However, before we proceed to the throne conference to vote on whether or not to divide this sum of money, I have something to say. That is, money is only meaningful when one is still alive, and when one's descendants still have a future. If the Azeroth is destroyed, then no matter how many gold coins there are, they will just be scrap metal. The Burning Legion is destined to come again. At the earliest it will be 5 years, and at the latest it will be no more than 10 years. I've said this a long time ago. If you doubt my words, you can choose to leave the Alliance and live a comfortable life in your little kingdom. Then you can quietly wait for the arrival of the apocalypse. However, when that time comes, there won't be any salvation, and there won't be any army from the Alliance to save you and your people. Not to mention that the Alliance won't have any extra troops at that time. Even if they do, they will just quietly watch you die. At this point, Duque's tone was already very heavy. The next time the Burning Legion comes, there won't be tens of thousands of evil demons arriving on this land, but hundreds of thousands. Even if the planet Azeroth's protective spell formation is still effective, considering the weakening of the dragon aspect, the worst-case scenario is that the Legion can easily send an army of over 10 million evil demons. Chapter 1987. With such a large number of demons, would our warriors be able to kill them all with ordinary swords? Even if every demon stretched out their neck for your soldiers to chop, they wouldn't be able to kill them all. Duque punched the armrest of his seat. That's right, we have a huge sum of money now. But after a modern war, would anyone dare to say that they have enough money to spend? If a main fleet of the Alliance were to fire at full force for an hour, the cost of ammunition alone would eat up a year's worth of taxes for a small country. Moreover, before the Burning Legion comes again, I predict that the modern war will be upgraded to a future war that will cost even more. When Duque said this, the old wolf King Xeon, Danath Trollbane and the other kings of the small countries all felt their faces burn slightly. This amount of wealth was too exaggerated. Even the real rich countries like Alterac were envious. The ones who cared about the dividends the most were the previously declining countries like Gilneas and Stromgarde. On the other side, Duque's explanation was still continuing. Our future war path is clear. We have a complete line of technology that we can imitate. For example, the Titan space technology. In addition, we also need to develop giant robots similar to the Blood Elf magic puppets. This is to make up for the physical difference between us intelligent races and the Burning Legion's mainstream demon soldiers. Also, to prevent our cities from being directly attacked from the sky, we need to build a large number of underground fortresses as the last refuge for our citizens. All of this requires a huge investment, and it is very likely that it will not be effective in the short term. Everyone had money and were excitedly preparing to make a fortune. Duque, the leader of the Alliance, had the clearest mind. Even with the glorious achievement of destroying the Horde, he could still clearly see the future. Duque could clearly see the changes in the leader's eyes. It was a change in mentality. He then began to conclude his speech. Of course, victory needs to be celebrated. I propose that the wealth seized from the goblins be distributed according to the rules set by the Alliance. I emphasize that this is only the distribution of ownership. 90% of the funds from the spoils of war will be reinvested into the Alliance under the name of special funds provided by the various countries for the development and production of military technology. All R&D and production accounts are open and transparent. Any allied country is allowed to send a monitoring team of no more than 100 people to monitor the movement and use of funds. As for the 10%, it's still a huge sum to any country or race. I hope everyone can put their money to better use. For example, improving the living standards of the people, speeding up the construction of infrastructure, underground air raid shelters, etc. Instead of squandering the money. Duque finished his explanation. The Alliance's temporary bill was naturally passed. He had done his best and kept most of the money in the Alliance to prevent his subordinates from courting death. People tend to be extravagant when they have money. This kind of death-seeking nature was inevitable. Even though they knew that the Burning Legion would come in the future, knowing that their boss was rich, all sorts of requests to spend money still flew to the hands of the various kings like snowflakes. All of them were pompous and dignified, celebrating a great victory. What kind of request to build a statue to commemorate the great king? All sorts of excuses. It was like a woman saying she didn't want anything when she was dating, but when it came to marriage she immediately said, once in a lifetime, wanted wedding photos, wanted a kilogram, oh, a carat diamond ring. Anyway, the mascot Queen Kalia didn't understand. Once she was happy, it was equivalent to half a year's worth of national taxes being allocated. Illusia could not suppress it at all and only managed to cut down 70% of it. In the end, beep beep beep, the loud sound of trumpets rang throughout the city. Starting from 10 kilometers outside Rotterdam, there was a trumpeter every 20 meters. There were humans, Dreenii, dwarves, gnomes, high elves, tauren, and trolls. Damn, it felt like the Rotterdam had invited all the trumpeters in the alliance, and even trained the tauren and trolls. This was just the appetizer. Starting from the military camp where the ceremony was held, the entire road was paved with marble. That's right, in just 10 days, the Rotterdam had airlifted over 10,000 tons of marble tiles from Alterac's warehouse. In order to deal with the crushing of tanks during the triumph ceremony, it was standard practice to attach rubber accessories to the tank tracks. The Rotterdam even used a large number of mages to solidify the ground with earth magic. More than 100,000 Rotterdam people worked for free, working 3 shifts to lay the ground. Within 10 days they laid out a beautiful white jade-like Triumph Avenue. On both sides of the avenue, there were more than 20 gorgeous mage towers. By the way, none of these mage towers were originally here. The people of Rotterdam used the most powerful flying transport ships to hoist the 7-story mage towers that were strengthened with magic. Damn it, Duque had just suggested that the electricity from the power plant should be used for high-voltage transmission, and that they could use the flying transport ships to hoist the electricity towers. The Rotterdam people had a wild imagination and made mage towers. It was to use the mage towers to provide elemental fireworks throughout the triumph ceremony. When it came to luxury, Duque was convinced. Countless girls from the Rotterdam kingdom were standing on a high platform made of prefabricated steel frames, scattering fresh petals to the passing soldiers. It was winter, how could there be so many petals? At first, Duque regretted teaching the Rotterdam people how to grow plants in a greenhouse. Now he found out that even the Cenarian Circle druids had been persuaded, bribed, to help with natural magic to create flowers and plants. Hundreds of thousands of people took the additional flying ship flights of the Alliance and rushed over from all over the Alliance. It was to witness this sacred ceremony. Their cheers were louder and louder, surging through the clouds in the sky and reaching the peak of the clouds. Everyone please take a look. This is the 7th Legion of Stormwind, formed after His Majesty Varian Rin regained power in the kingdom. This glorious legion has participated in major battles such as the Battle of the Outland of Draenor, the Battle of the Well of the Sun, and the Battle of Northrend. It is an unyielding army with a strong will. Sally still looked young and beautiful. She had solidified the age of her body at 18 years old. As a member of the Alliance's hero group, no matter who asked, Duque would definitely give them an eternal meal. Now that the Bronze Dragon King Nosdormu was still alive, eternal life was a small matter. Actually, as one of the famous dog-and-dog couples in the game, Sally was also very popular among the players. Back then, Duque had also thought about pushing down Sally, but his harem was too inflated. There were many scabbards, but there was only one divine sword. Using a limited sword to deal with an infinite scabbard, Duque thought about it and gave up. Chapter 1988. Next up is the trump card of Lordaeron, the Scarlet Cross Army. Sally's voice became more impassioned, and one could hear the pride in her voice. Ever since the second battle at the Dark Portal, I've never seen anything like it. The Scarlet Cross Army has been fighting on the front lines against evil. Its glorious history can be traced back to the establishment of the Mograine territory 300 years ago. Cheers, screams, noises, and the voices of girls professing their love reverberated in the sky above Lordaeron for a long time. Duque sat at the head of the table. On his right was William, who was also the deputy commander, and on his left was the demigod Queen Sylvanas. If one were to expand further, it would be his extremely exaggerated harem. It wasn't Duque's intention. After all, his wives happened to be the leaders of the strongest countries or races in the Alliance. My wives are all queens. This joke had been used many times by the middle and lower classes of the Alliance. If not for Duke's status as a demigod and the fact that he had signed a law for the welfare of his male compatriots, commonly known as the Harem Act, Duke would have been beaten to the sh*t by everyone who envied him. There was basically no regret when one reached Duke's level. If it wasn't for the fact that he knew that the Burning Legion was still coming to cause trouble, Duke even had the guts to announce his retirement right now. He would go home and hug his wives. The victory ceremony was extremely grand and noisy, but as a transmigrator, Duke really didn't care about it. When the guards of honor sent by the various countries passed by the Alliance leader's platform, Duke stood on the skull of a 10-story tall fire elemental giant. After inspecting the troops, Duke began his routine speech. 30 years ago, the Burning Legion's hands finally reached Azeroth. The fallen Titan Sargeras did not hesitate to plot for more than 200 years just to possess the son of the previous guardian Aegwynn, the previous guardian Medivh. The controlled Medivh opened the famous dark portal together with the orc warlock ghoul, Dan, and from then on, opened the prelude to the war in Azeroth. 30 years passed in the blink of an eye. We've seen the terrifying green tide formed by the demonized beastmen. We've resisted the undead's undead sea. We've defeated the Burning Legion's vice-commander's demonic army. We've destroyed the ancient gods and their followers who wanted to destroy the world. In the process, we united more and more kingdoms and different races. For the ultimate goal of destroying evil, we became brothers and sisters of different races. Here I, Duke Marcus, am pleased to announce in my capacity as the commander of the Alliance that after 30 years, we are still standing tall in this world. Standing at the peak of all races. Duke's speech was transmitted to the ears of the people of the Alliance through countless magic loudspeakers and tens of thousands of magic mirrors. It was branded on their retinas. Oh! Countless fists were raised high into the sky. An endless number of weapons stood tall like a forest. Tens of thousands of cannons pointed at the sky. Be it the commoners or the soldiers, they all let out the loudest cheers from the surging pride in their hearts. Long live the Alliance! Long live Azeroth! Duke who allowed the people to shout loudly, venting the fanaticism in their hearts. After a full 3 minutes, when the exaggerated cheers died down, Duke continued his speech. Some people say that the Alliance's prosperity today is all thanks to me, the commander. My wives are the first to disagree, Duke joked. Queen Sylvie behind him raised her eyebrows cooperatively. The magic mirrors even gave Queen Sylvie a close-up. Many of the people below burst out in kind laughter. You must be joking. Perhaps the role of a leader is to control the general direction, but the reason why the Alliance has its prosperity today is because of the efforts of tens of millions of Alliance members and your tolerance. Without the gnomes' inventions and dwarves' forging, we might still be facing the 10-foot-tall demon guards with iron swords. Without elven magic, we would still be in the barren era of cold weapons. Without the Dreniai's holy light and holy water, we would still be fighting against evil with the most effective weapons. It is precisely because of the participation of various races that have the same goal of fighting against evil that the Alliance can prosper today. So, as long as they are not the minions of the Burning Legion, not the servants of the ancient gods, not driven by the evil gods, as long as an intelligent race requests to join the Alliance, we will give a friendly welcome. Here, let us welcome the new races that have joined the Alliance: Pandaren, Tauren, Trolls, and the Forgotten. The addition of the new 4 races was just a ceremonial matter. The Alliance Throne Conference had already announced this news, and the people had already digested it. To be honest, when the Dreniai who looked the strangest were accepted by the people of the Alliance, there were no races that could not be accepted. Of course, the most popular was the Pandaren. The Pandaren was a national treasure. No matter which world it was, as long as they stood there doing nothing, just their cute appearance could capture the hearts of countless people. The Pandaren were very funny. Although everyone knew that the leader was Xiaohao, they couldn't just pull out a ghost to represent them, right? Zhu Mistletoe insisted that he was the leader of a secret organization and was not suitable to appear in public. As a result, it was announced that the leader of the Pandaren was Qin Stormlicker. Old Qin was very annoyed, but this was personally appointed by Emperor Xiaohao. The Pandaren valued the teachings of their ancestors the most, so he had to be the leader. In the end, he became the leader, and his niece Lily became even more popular. The excited screams of the people could be heard everywhere, such as, "So cute! Can I hug you?" The people of the Alliance welcomed the Pandaren from the bottom of their hearts. As a race that the Alliance actively invited, the Pandaren naturally received the loudest cheers. When it came to the Tauren, the applause was not bad, but for the Trolls and the Forsaken. Except for the official friendly applause, there was no applause from the people. Of course, Duque couldn't ignore them. He publicly supported Darien, who had been promoted to the leader of the Forsaken. Yes, perhaps the Alliance once had a war with the Trolls and the Forsaken. But that's in the past. Even if you used to be hostile, as long as you are wholeheartedly integrated into the Alliance, the people of the Alliance will see your efforts and recognize you. Also, the Alliance is open. It is a righteous organization that fights against evil. We welcome all intelligent races that are willing to give their all to fight against evil to join us. Duque said this to clear the name of the Alliance. After all, he had been a little happy recently. Who knew that something would happen when he was showing off? A voice suddenly burst out from the crowd. I, Sal, the chief of the Orc Frostwolf clan, apply to join the Alliance on behalf of the clan. At this moment, Duque's expression was very interesting. Chapter 1989. Sal was a great figure that couldn't be avoided when the tribe was mentioned. Perhaps the elders of the old tribe owed the people of Azeroth a debt of blood, but ultimately, it had nothing to do with Sal. It wasn't even a debt of the sun. After all, the Frostwolf clan that Sal's father, Durotan, brought had been expelled by the old tribe controlled by Ghoul, Dan after they came to Azeroth. After Durotan and his wife were killed, the Frostwolf clan hid in the mountains of Alterac and played hide-and-seek after the Dark Portal 1 and 2. They were considered to be completely neutral. In terms of the relationship between the Alliance and the tribe, Sal didn't start a war with the Alliance when he was the chief in this life. He didn't start a war with the Alliance even once when he was in power. Perhaps it was because the Alliance led by Duke was too domineering. In any case, there had never been a single war in history, big or small, with different degrees of friction and regular wars. It was because he acted as the Dove faction in the tribe that caused the dissatisfaction of the traditionalists and radicals, which forced Sal to step down if he didn't start a massacre. Strictly speaking, if Sal hadn't been soft-hearted and failed to abandon nearly 3 million traditionalist beastmen in Draenor, or ruthlessly suppress the traditionalists, the tribe wouldn't have fallen into chaos. As long as the tribe wasn't in chaos, it was like a rope. No one would die if they touched it. At least, the Alliance couldn't do anything. Not only did they not have a righteous cause, they also had to face complete resistance. The traditionalist beastmen didn't have the blockhouses of the Frostwolf and Warsong clans. They were all masters of guerrilla warfare and tunnel warfare. Of course, the Alliance could use the Karakis and Oro's children to eliminate them, but they had to find the beastmen first. The Alliance didn't have good tools to investigate underground. Sound waves and elemental detectors weren't useful in the Barrenlands full of caves. How big was the Wailing Cave in the Barrenlands in the real world? It was more than 20 kilometers long and 5 kilometers wide. There were thousands of winding paths and caves inside. It would be no problem to squeeze 100,000 troops in. Not every place had a landscape like the Wailing Cave. Even if there weren't large caves, there were still many small caves. This was the biggest headache for the Alliance now. The Orthodox tribe had been wiped out, but the Frostwolf tribe, one of the 3 main warring tribes, was nowhere to be found. Previously, Duque couldn't understand it, but now all his questions seemed to have been answered. Following the sound, the tens of thousands of people in the venue saw a minotaur transforming. It was a perfect illusion. No one knew who had made it for Thrall. Anyway, the luster on the body of a huge Tauren was changing colors and transforming. It was as magical as the ultimate transformation spell. A Tauren turned into a bare-chested former chief, Thrall, wearing only a pair of leather pants, a pair of leather boots and nothing in his hands. Beside Thrall was an old acquaintance, the legendary assassin, the female orc, Garona. No wonder. Duque sighed softly. The history of the world of Azeroth overlapped with each other. This wasn't the first time Duque had experienced this. Garona's appearance perfectly explained why Sar, who should have died in Orgrimmar's volcanic eruption, was here. If it was Garona who had stabbed King Lang to death in the original history, then it wouldn't be surprising. What made Duque even more depressed was that Sar had perfectly defeated him. In the face of the Alliance's guards who rushed over, looking at the guards who had drawn their swords and the paladins who were glowing with holy golden light, Sar and Garona both spread their hands to show that they had no weapons and were not hostile. The words that Sar had just shouted in the common language had pushed the entire Alliance Throne Conference to the forefront. Of course, Duque could announce that Sar had been killed on the spot, but doing so would undoubtedly be slapping his own face. The Alliance had always regarded itself as a righteous organization that fought against evil. It was this thorough and unswerving policy, coupled with the corresponding strength that allowed them to get in touch with the Sleeping Dragon Temple and the Guardians, forming a further alliance. Genocide was not a simple matter. For the Alliance, which claimed to be righteous, it was only when Brainless Roar came to power that they had an absolute excuse to act. In order to destroy the Horde and prevent the revival of the Horde, Duque did not hesitate to absorb Taurens, Trolls, and the Forsaken into the Alliance. Who would have thought that only a short time had passed? Sar was completely waiting for Duque to say these righteous words, and then he would take advantage of the situation and apply to join the Alliance in the name of an independent clan. Guards, arrest these remnants of the Horde. William, who had a bad temper, could not hold it in. He stood up immediately and almost pulled out his artifact dual swords to fight himself. As a middle-aged man, William had matured a lot, but there were some things that could never be concealed. For example, his father, King Lang, had ultimately died in the hands of the Horde's assassins. His orders could not be said to be wrong. The Alliance destroyed the Orthodox Horde, which was led by the Orcs and supported by the Rusty Water Goblins and Magathas Taurens. Strictly speaking, the Alliance and the remnants of the Orthodox Horde were still in a state of war. But it depended on the timing. Here, Duque had just said that all intelligent races were welcome to fight against evil, and here William came to capture the unarmed Sar. Wasn't this a slap in the face to one's own people? Sar faced the sharp swords of the Silverhand Paladins that were almost at his throat, ignoring Lena Thunderspear's warhammer that was hanging above his head, and took a step forward proudly and slowly. May I ask the Alliance commander, Sir Marcus? When I was the chief of the Horde, I had never fought with the Alliance. My Frostwolf clan and I had never raised our weapons against the Alliance's soldiers and people. Since the Trolls and the Forsaken had been at war with the Alliance, they could be accepted by the Alliance. Why did the Alliance arrest me? Was what you said just now a lie to confuse the people and whitewash justice? Sar's common language was abnormally standard, and every word was clear and penetrating. Almost every sentence was directed at what Duque had just said. It was a bit like a paradox, but it was a fact. It was obvious that Sar had seen through everything and was sure that the Alliance under the leadership of Duque would not make a move against him. What was even better was that in order to whitewash the Orcs and the Frostwolf clan, Sar had sold out his former allies, the Darkspear Trolls and the Forsaken. Woken rolled his eyes, Ben smiled bitterly, and Delano, who was standing next to him as the deputy leader of the Forsaken, also scratched his head. In order to destroy the Horde, the Alliance could be said to have painstakingly planned for how long Duque had been plotting. Of course, the Alliance would not be so stupid as to dismember the Horde here and let the Horde come to the Alliance and become parasites, sucking the Alliance's blood to grow again. Sar's betrayal of his former teammates was more like a heart-to-heart, to show that he had no ambition. Chapter 1990. So many leaders of the Alliance wanted to wipe out the Beastmen even in their dreams. Now, Thrall actually jumped out and said that he wanted the Frostwolves to join the Alliance. This situation was extremely delicate and awkward. Even if Thrall took a step back and allowed the Frostwolves to join the Alliance, would the Frostwolves have a good time? William was about to explode with rage. Duque was still the experienced one. He pressed one hand on William's shoulder. Deputy Commander William's orders are not wrong. After all, when the tribe declared war on the Alliance, the Frostwolf clan was still a part of the Orthodox tribe. From the day of the declaration of war, the Alliance did not have any diplomatic contact with the Frostwolf clan. Thrall suddenly realized his mistake. The Frostwolf clan and the Blackrock clan have already raised the flag of crusade against the evil chief, Garush, who defected to Yashiji. Duque insisted. That was an internal rebellion of the tribe. At most, it was considered an uprising. At that time, your slogans did not announce the independence of these two clans from the tribe. So, until now, the Alliance has defined your Excellency's Frostwolf clan as the remnants of the tribe. This is not wrong. William's expression softened. Everyone could see that Duque had calmly turned the tables. Thrall raised his head. Then, may I ask, Your Excellency, are you going to arrest us as the remnants of the tribe? Just as Duque was about to speak, a certain dragon king with the appearance of a night elf laughed in the VIP seats. Nosdormu sent a message to Duque using a special telepathic message. Yo Duque. My duty has already ended. Even after the cataclysm, the future that I saw for a long time became blank. I originally thought that it was because this world was writing a new history. But do you know? Know what? Duke replied snappily through his telepathy. I just saw an image from another timeline. That was the direction of another history. Very interesting. Garush Hellscream was not killed. With the help of one of my traders, he went to another timeline and created the Iron Tribe, in an attempt to counterattack the main timeline. Then, he was destroyed by the Alliance and the tribe in this world. More than 10 years passed on the other side. Durotan didn't die, but he didn't give birth to a son. Instead, he gave birth to a daughter named Gyara. Pfft. Duque snorted. What the hell? Sal had actually turned into a woman. Turned into a female orc? And there's no little hook? Would such a ridiculous thing really happen? Nozdormu's laughter could be heard. We can't be sure about other timelines. Perhaps the future would change again. Who knows? The future represented limitless possibilities. You're a demigod of the weave, the strongest hero of Azeroth. Why would you be afraid of a little orc hero without any power? Yes. I, Duque, am not afraid of him. Could it be that Sal could flip over the five-finger mountain of the Buddha? Once he entered the Alliance, he would be as deep as the ocean. Once he entered, Sal could forget about causing trouble. On the surface, Duque looked very pretentious and fair. Remnants of the tribe? If you choose to fight to the end, then my answer is yes. The Alliance wasn't afraid of war or guerrilla warfare. Of course, if the Frostwolf clan chooses to join the Alliance, then I will announce in the name of the Alliance commander that the Throne Conference will review and vote on the Frostwolf clan's application. Duque turned his head. Men, invite the two distinguished guests of the Frostwolf clan to the state guesthouse in Lordaeron. Treat them like the leader of a clan. With Duque's words, the guards could only put away their weapons. Lena Thunderspear made an inviting gesture. Sal sighed secretly. He was forcing Duque, but he was actually afraid. Not to mention that he was no longer the chief of the tribe. Even if he was still the chief, he had lost the position to talk to Duque on equal terms. This kind of risk could only be used once. Presumably, the Alliance would strengthen security in the future and amend various regulations, such as refusing to accept the alliance of the city or using the opportunity to threaten to block the last possibility of the enemy causing trouble. But this time the Frostwolf clan had passed, right? The farce came to an end, but with Sal's interruption, the atmosphere of victory was immediately diluted. But the ceremony still had to continue. Duque revealed a slightly awkward but polite smile. Think about it, everyone. Even the former chief of the tribe led his clan to join the alliance. Doesn't this prove the justice of the alliance against the tribe? With the support and hard work of everyone in the alliance, we finally won this sacred war. We should be happy. Shouldn't we? Yes, absolutely right. The expressions of the alliance leader and the people were much better. Let me think, in this case, wouldn't I be Sal's senior? The gnome was a funny one. Master Craftsman Jerbin's seemingly funny words immediately made everyone feel better. What was pretentious? This was pretentious. In the past, the chief of the tribe had not been a slave of the conquered. Instead, he had taken the initiative and pitifully came to be the Alliance's shoe-carrying lackey. This kind of feeling was simply wonderful. For a moment, the atmosphere was lively again. It was not easy to turn the situation around. Of course, it was time to continue celebrating. Duque waved his hand, and Vashj, who had appeared in the form of a Naga, came over. Back then, the Storm Nagas joined the Alliance as a third-tier vassal race. Now, I am honored to announce that the Storm Nagas have been promoted to the second tier. There were many Naga clans, but the Nagas were considered one of the elders of the Alliance. After all, the earliest Rage-Scale Naga had joined Duque before the war. Ordinary people could not tell the difference between the Rage-Scale Nagas and the Storm Nagas. Anyway, they were all under Vashj's control now. The promotion of the Storm Naga, who had once been under Illidan's command, was even more meaningful. The triumphant ceremony finally came to an end amidst the cheers and laughter. This day was destined to belong to the Alliance. The tribe had become a thing of the past. The Alliance's reception after the banquet was also a good time for discussion. In a secret room that was specially used for discussion, the main leaders of the Alliance gathered together. William was the first to speak. He was still a little unwilling. Are we going to let the orcs off just like that? Muradin was the most experienced. He patted William's shoulder. Without the tribe, the orcs will no longer be a problem. You are not just a king now. Jaina gently turned the cup of black tea in her hand. How many people can a Frostwolf clan have? Less than 50,000. Moreover, we cannot give the Frostwolves the first-tier status. In the future, we will use war to control the population of the Frostwolves. As long as they enter the Alliance's system, we have 10,000 ways to restrict or even kill the orcs. After this speech, the leaders immediately had no objections. Chapter 1991. Jaina's words were a little dark. Perhaps it was different from the Alliance's mainstream policy of multiracial harmony. As a countermeasure, it could be considered a form of insurance. Hoof had a different opinion. Delaney still can't trust the orcs. How many times had this happened? The first time was the evil demon blood, the second time was the power of Yashiji. Is there a third time? Lord Imriel, if you're really that worried, I think we can let the orcs learn the way of the holy light, Theon suggested. At this moment, Duque, who was the commander of the alliance, laughed. What a brilliant idea. I think it's not bad. Let's do that. And I think we can add something. For example? Tyrant and the others were curious. At the end of the day, it's the traditional orcs' backward lifestyle of hunting that triggered the tribal unrest and deepened the inclination towards war. That kind of mindless method of snatching hunting grounds when there was no prey was too backward. So we returned a portion of the barren lands to the Frostwolf clan. Then he taught them farming techniques. I can personally assist the Cenarian Circle to further transform the land in the barren lands. This is good. Malfurion was most delighted to see that. Whoever was using the land, it was always a good thing that the scars on the land could be repaired. Then, force Thrall and every orc in his Frostwolf clan to learn the common language within a certain period of time. If they fail to complete the task within the time limit, they will be punished with non-violence. I haven't thought of the details yet. Poor communication is one of the root causes of conflict. If we can understand each other better, it will reduce a lot of unnecessary friction. Finally, there's the way of life in a fixed settlement. With farming as the foundation, the lifestyle had to change accordingly. I think the Alliance can do a lot. In a sense, what Duque was doing was more like colonization. When a country or a people was colonized for a long time, many lifestyles and ways of thinking would be subtly changed under the washing of time. It was just like how Hindustan had been ruled by the empire where the sun never sets for more than 100 years. Even today, traces of it could still be seen in every aspect. There were countless connections between them and there was no end to it. Since Sal chose to join the Alliance as his last resort, he couldn't blame the Alliance for assimilating the Beastmen. After reaching a preliminary consensus in the Throne Conference, Duque summoned Thrall. The change in their status caused the two of them to no longer be on equal footing as before. Duque did not deliberately humiliate Sal. Firstly, there was no need to do so. Secondly, that would be too petty. The victor had already been decided and they were no longer enemies, so there was no need for him to do such a shameful thing. Duque was entertaining Sal in the Lordaeron Palace. As the husband of Queen Kalia, he owned a small palace that covered an area of 1,000 square meters in the palace. Originally, he didn't want to be so troublesome, but the 4 queen wives insisted on building a palace for Duque. This made Duque even more certain of his title as the uncrowned emperor. Of course, having an elemental demigod as a husband was also a kind of social climb for a queen of the mortal world. The nobles of every country were proud of it. When he arrived at the palace of Rotterdam City, Sal was filled with emotions. Led by the thief hero Vanessa, they walked into the living room. Queen Kalia came out to say hello and left. In the resplendent living room, only Duque, Sal and the maids Vanessa and Vashti were left. Duque was very considerate and prepared a large pot of Rotterdam's ale for Sal, which was a specialty of Rotterdam. Picking up the large wine glass specially prepared for the orcs, Sal took a big gulp without hesitation. Duque noticed that Sal used his big green finger to pick up a napkin on the plate and wiped his mouth. It tastes good. Come to think of it, I haven't tasted this in almost 15 years. 15 years? Well, I was still a slave gladiator. Occasionally, I would be rewarded with some ale by my master, because of my outstanding performance. Although I hated that part of my life, I still liked ale. Do you think the Frostwolf clan is here to be slaves this time? A playful smile appeared on Duque's face. Unexpectedly, Sal curled his lips. When I was young, I felt that being a slave was the most disgusting. When I grew up and became a chief for a long time, after the situation between the Alliance and the Horde changed, I realized that there was something more terrible than being a slave in the world, the destruction of the entire race. Duque was silent. It was not that he could not continue the conversation, but he wanted to see Sal's resolve. Sal stared at Duque. The Horde lost and the orcs also lost. I came with the resolve of a loser. Even if the Alliance once again treats the orcs as slaves, I and the Frostwolf clan will accept it. What are you asking for? Very simple, the reproduction of the orc race. The orcs are a great and brave race. They have made many mistakes and gone through many detours. I do not think the orcs should be destroyed. At the same time, I think the orcs will be a very good supplement for the Alliance. The Alliance will always need professional warriors. Duque was really unpredictable. Sal could only continue to act like a salesman and persuade Duque to accept the Orcs alliance under the premise that the Throne Conference had not reached a conclusion. In terms of this, the alliance has many substitutes. For example, the burly Tauren and Draenei. If we need agility, we also have werewolves. They are too few in number. They can be used as an elite assault force, but not as a conventional, expendable vanguard warrior. According to Sal, if he did not have a typical orc appearance, no one could imagine that he was an absolute orc. This was simply betraying his compatriots. Duque was surprised. For a moment, Duque almost thought that Sal was up to something. This kind of shameless bootlicking, was he really Sal? But in the next second, Duque found that Sal was still the same Sal. He was smart, rational, and not lacking in courage. If the alliance was led by someone else, then I would probably be like this, groveling in order to seek the survival and reproduction of the orcs. Then I would quietly wait for an opportunity. When the alliance is weak or careless, then I would destroy the alliance from the inside. At the very least, I would free the orcs from the alliance's slavery. Then what if I am the leader of the alliance? Duque leaned back safely, letting his back rest on the sofa. He crossed his legs and interlaced his fingers on his thighs. Sal, on the other hand, shrugged and said, "No way. I am 30 years old this year. If it were any other alliance leader, I might be able to endure it and see if I could wait until the leader of the alliance grew old or died accidentally. But in the face of a demigod of Azeroth who was immortal and could not even be destroyed, and such a wise and great leader, I can only accept my fate." Chapter 1992. Pfft. Duque laughed. He knew that Sal was sucking up to him, but it felt good. He was Sal, the greatest leader of the tribe, second to none. In history, even the successors Wajin and Queen Shay were not as wise and courageous as Sal. If a normal member of the alliance tried to suck up to Duke would only treat them as a bystander who was cheering 666. If it were Sal, this wave of flattery would have been quite effective. "Sal, there are very few people who can make me blush or feel embarrassed. In recent years, you are the first." "Oh, then it's my honor." Sal bowed. "Have you and the Frostwolf really accepted your fate?" Duque stopped smiling and became serious. "Yes, in fact. There are still many Blackrock and Warsong beastmen who survived. I'm just a pathfinder." Sal was straightforward. This was clearly saying that if the alliance could not even accept the Frostwolf tribe, which had the cleanest background, then the remaining beastmen could only resist to the end in despair. Duque did not care. He stood up, took a few steps, and looked out the window. "Did you know? So, since the moment the tribe set foot on the land of Azeroth, I have been planning the destruction of the tribe. For 30 years I have never stopped thinking about this. After you became the leader of the tribe, I also tried to see if the two huge organizations could coexist on this vast planet. After all, the Burning Legion and the evil forces of the ancient gods brought too much pressure to the alliance." Sal was a little sad. "Sorry, the tribe did not seize this opportunity." "That's right. If the tribe had taken advantage of the situation to rise, perhaps until today, once there are no external enemies, the alliance and the tribe will immediately start attacking each other. After all, in the bones of the tribe, they still advocate using force to solve everything. Fortunately, the alliance is strong now, and the tribe self-destructed in the hands of Gurus. Perhaps this is fate." Sal also sighed. "Okay, let's not talk anymore. The return of the Burning Legion is a destined future. In a few years we will see more signs." "You are right. Now that it is Azeroth, we need any powerful intelligent race to participate in the war against evil. There would come a time when the Alliance would make use of the orcs. However, I must remind you, since the orcs have joined the Alliance, don't let the traditionalists raise their heads. Otherwise..." Duque gently raised his hand, and the white jade sculpture on his left suddenly turned into a beast man. A second later it was instantly erased. There was no wreckage or even dust. Just like that, he silently disappeared from this world. This meant that if the beastmen had any more thoughts of rebellion, he wouldn't mind erasing all the beastmen from the universe. This was no longer a warning, it was a death line he had drawn for Sal. Who touched it? Who would destroy them? Sal felt a chill in his heart. "Understood. Once upon a time I softened and let the traditionalists take control. In this generation, even if we have to pay the price of blood, we can't let them hinder the beastmen's reproduction." Now that the negotiation was done, all that was left was to go through the motions. On the 5th of January, the 30th year of the Dark Portal, the Alliance officially announced that the Frostwolf tribe had joined the Alliance as a second-class tribe. At the same time, the Beastmen, Taurens, and Trolls removed the obvious tribal title of Chieftain and changed it to Leader. On the 10th of January, the remaining Blackrock tribe and Warsong tribe joined the Alliance and were classified as third-class vassal tribes. The leader of the Blackrock tribe was Varrock Salyafar. As for the Warsong tribe, the leader of the Warsong tribe roared for Grom Hell. Yes, Grom, who had always been in pain and chose not to help either side, finally chose to return to his tribe in the state of a heroic spirit. Considering that Master Roar had been with him for so many years, Duque allowed it. Other than using the magic power of the weave as a source of power to support his body, Grom had nothing to do with Duque. This could be considered parting on good terms. Grom would temporarily take over the position of leader as a heroic spirit until he nurtured a disciple who could inherit his mantle. At this point, the time node of the Mystery of Pandaria had come to an end. Because of the complete death of Braindead Roar and the elimination of a traitor in Nozdormu's family, there would no longer be the King of Draenor. Azeroth entered a rare period of peace. The Alliance announced the implementation of the 5-year plan, which focused on climbing the technology tree. The core of the plan was to combine the various black technologies left behind by the Titans and Draenei and reverse engineer them to create all kinds of combat weapons. At the same time, some demons who had been captured by the Alliance or the former tribes became experimental subjects. Time flew and 35 years had passed since the Dark Portal. When the Alliance announced that the first 5-year plan had been completed, the second 5-year plan had begun. On this day, a prison that seemed to have been forgotten by the world welcomed a special guest. The commander of the Alliance, Duke Marcus. As the warden May of Shadowsong, who had extremely high authority and was a legendary hero, she could ignore almost any leader of the Alliance. Duque was definitely the exception. It was not only because of Duque's strength and authority, but also because of Duque's achievements. Even if she only left the prison once a year to attend the secret meeting of the Alliance's higher-ups, she could feel the changes that the Alliance and even Darnassus had undergone under Duque's transformation. It was more beautiful, full of life, energy, and security. Mayev bowed to welcome Duque and led Duque to the deepest part of the dungeon. It was dark and airless, but it was unexpectedly clean. This was obviously the result of meticulous work day after day. It could be seen that Mayev did not mistreat the prisoners here. Kaboom! With a loud noise, the round stone door, which weighed more than 100 tons, was pushed open by the nature magic array, revealing a spiral staircase leading downwards. Duke floated in the air with the support of the water elements, and slowly descended 100 meters. When Mayev opened the last cell door, Duque saw a blue-skinned half-demon kneeling in the middle of the cell. Oh, what a rare guest. It's you. Faced with Illidan's question, Duque was very calm. It's me. How is Tyrant? Illidan raised his head slightly, a flame flickering in his eyes that were covered by a black cloth. She's busy taking care of the child. Duque's mouth twitched as he casually said something that was actually provoking Illidan. The veins on Illidan's temples bulged, but he quickly became discouraged. Oh, the year before last she told me that she wanted your child. She didn't come last year. Illidan tried to suppress his emotions. Damn it, Mayev didn't tell me anything. Duque sighed in his heart. No matter how many years had passed, Illidan's heart was still with Tyrant. Unfortunately, Tyrant was not fated to be with him, whether it was in his previous life or this one. She's a very beautiful girl. Tyrant said that if you weren't a degenerate, she would be willing to let the child recognize you as the father. Chapter 1993. Illidan suddenly stood up, and the holy light shackles on his body clanked. Mayev immediately tightened her grip on her weapon. Duque was extremely calm. Duke Marcus, are you using me? Illidan clenched his fists. Use? Duque shrugged. If you think I'm using you, then so be it. But remember, I'm not using anyone to threaten you. Tyrant is already my woman, and I won't use my woman and child as a bargaining chip against her admirer. I'm just making a proposal that will make you and Tyrant happy. I'm against this decision. Illidan suddenly loosened his fists and sat down again. What do you want me to do? I know that when we attacked the Black Temple, your most elite demon hunters weren't there. I'm guessing that they went to the Burning Legion. Illidan became agitated again. You don't know anything. Don't know? Duque raised his hand and revealed a purplish-blue energy ball. The image inside was of Illidan's order for his subordinates to go to the Burning Legion's planet of origin, Martin, to carry out a suicide mission, to seize Sargera's keystone. It was a divine artifact that could open a portal to any army planet. Not only Illidan but even Mayev beside him gasped. Even though Duque had told Mayev earlier, Illidan was probably not that simple. When they saw the evidence of Illidan secretly stabbing the Burning Legion, they still felt extremely shocked. Illidan, Ever since the War of the Ancients, you've realized the strength of the Burning Legion. You thought that there was no way out by directly confronting the Legion. So you chose the path that your compatriots don't understand, and it's also the most difficult path. Even if you have to bear the stigma of a traitor, you still joined the Burning Legion to find the Legion's weakness and then destroy it in one fell swoop. Am I right? Duque's voice was not loud, but it was like a giant hammer hitting Illidan and Maev's hearts, making them feel like their hearts were about to collapse in the next moment. Maeve was shocked. Illidan's mouth twitched and he couldn't speak for a long time. Let me tell you one more thing. The detection circle I left in Draenor is reacting. A void battleship of the Burning Legion infiltrated the galaxy where Delano was. Guess who's on the boat? Duque looked like he had Illidan in the bag. Illidan remained silent. They should be the key to the counterattack in your eyes. Duque's words shattered Illidan's last shred of hope. For the first time, Illidan looked at Duque with fear and awe. Illidan was blind. But in his empty eye sockets, the soul waves emitted by the soul fire that replaced the function of his eyes meant this. Even Maeve could sense it. She held Illidan captive for 10,000 years, then 10. She had never seen her unruly compatriot show such a weak expression. There's no point in hiding it. To a powerful existence that has experienced countless time branches, your past is no secret to me. If you wish, I can even announce it to the public right away. That way you can once again become the hero of Caldorii, a good brother in the eyes of your elder brother. Obtain Tyron's forgiveness. There was no way to resist. Duque had perfectly grasped Illidan's weakness. Illidan was discouraged. It's not time to make this public yet, but I will do as you say. That's right. On that mysterious spaceship were the Illidan demon hunters sent by Illidan. Just like in history, they had miraculously completed their mission. In history, they had survived and returned to the Black Temple. But as soon as they returned, they found that the Black Temple had been breached and Illidan had died at the hands of Maeve the Watcher. These demon hunters were captured by Maeve and imprisoned in the prison on the Broken Isles. They had been locked up in a state of stasis for 5 years. But in this life, probably because of Duque's actions, they were caught in a space-time turbulence, or to escape the pursuit of the Burning Legion. They actually delayed until the 36th year of the Dark Portal before returning. But it didn't matter. Illidan was not dead anyway. It was too easy to control these powerful demon hunters. It's okay. I don't think that announcing everything will benefit the war with the Burning Legion. The war hasn't started yet. Announcing it now will only alarm the enemy. How about this? I will have your elder brother and Tyron come to see you. Duque patted Illidan's shoulder. This time Duque had him in the bag. Illidan asked, then, what about the keystone? Duque rolled his eyes at him. We can't just use this small number of people to sneak in while the Burning Legion is still at home. That would be a suicide mission. Let's wait for the right time. According to my judgment, there will be results in a year. Can you wait? Umph. Illidan snorted disdainfully. I can even wait for 10,000 years, let alone a year. After saying that, the One-Egg Lord glanced at Maeve with even more disdain. Lock me up. I will be your prisoner for another year. Maeve was embarrassed. She had hated the One-Egg Lord for 10,000 years. In the past 10,000 years she had used many methods to torture him. Now she was suddenly told that she had hated the wrong person for the past 10,000 years. The feeling of loss was killing her. Seeing Maeve's disappointed and guilty expression, Duque couldn't help but wonder if Maeve had turned from a sadist to a masochist because of her guilt. Duque left. In the 35 years of the Dark Portal, there was only one major event that happened publicly, the return of the former king of Ironforge, Magni Bronzebeard. On the 1st of June, Bulang Bronzebeard ran into the Alliance headquarters in Lordaeron. As one of the two main headquarters of the Alliance, Duque often worked here. The headquarters used to be in Stormwind City. Later, because most of Duque's wives were in Lordaeron, they moved the Alliance headquarters to Lordaeron in 32 years of the Dark Portal with reasons like, there are more kingdoms in Lordaeron, and the two commanders of the Alliance don't stay in the same place. Bulang walked quickly with his short legs and shouted loudly, my brother came back to life. After shouting incoherently for a while, he felt that it was inappropriate, so he added a few more words. My brother, who had become a crystal fossil, suddenly came back to life. Duque. Brother Magni wants you to go find him immediately. This is really a sign. There were two obvious signs of the Legion's return. One was the return of the demon hunters, and the other was the return of Magni after becoming a demigod. Both of them. Sure enough, when Duque and a group of Alliance leaders put down their work and rushed to Ironforge, they saw the Crystal Dwarf King. The first thing he said was, "The Burning Legion is coming." Chapter 1994. Magni Bronzebeard, the previous king of the Bronzebeard tribe of Steel Stove Castle. In order to pursue the path of a demigod, he had turned into a diamond man after settling all his affairs. Coming out of the portal of Steel Stove Castle's secret spell zone, the leaders of the various countries realized that they had bumped into each other, so they decided to go together. They had been to Steel Stove Castle countless times, and the biggest difference was the elated dwarves. Everywhere they went, they could see dwarves holding large beer bottles and drinking to their heart's content. They could hear them shouting, "Long live King Magni." Secondly, under Bulang's lead, they saw the reopening of the king's hall that had been sealed for almost a decade. After Magni turned into a diamond man, in order to show that he had no intention of inheriting the throne, Muradin, who had taken over as acting king, moved his office away from the king's hall. He only asked for a side hall beside the king's hall, and even his desk had a sign that read Steel Stove Castle Regent, written in fist-sized letters. Today the king's hall was reopened. From afar, everyone could see 3 layers of dwarven guards surrounding the secret chamber. But as they got closer, they heard a scream that sounded like a pig being slaughtered. "Bastard! If you touch me again, I'll kill you." Oh, this was a familiar and intimidating voice that Magni was extremely familiar with. Why are the dwarven guards in the secret chamber snickering? Just a little? Just a little? That was the voice of the dwarf craftsman Jurbin. Scram. A dwarf's beard is not to be violated. Put down that electric drill and I'll admit that we're good friends. No, no, no. Can't you sacrifice a little for your old friend? No? Scram. There was another roar. With Bulang leading the way, everyone immediately saw Muradin, who was smiling bitterly, and the 2 dwarves in the middle of the hall, who looked like they were about to commit rape. An impact drill in his left hand and an electric saw in his right. If not for the fact that Jurbin, who was less than a meter tall, was too short, he would have looked like a chainsaw murderer. On the other side, the diamond man, who was dodging left and right, was naturally Magni. He had snatched a guard's shield and was pathetically blocking the dwarf craftsman's electric saw. "Jurbin, that's enough." Duque chuckled as he stopped the bewitched Jurbin. At his cry, Jurbin paused regretfully and switched off the saw. After so many years of cooperation, Duque's prestige was unparalleled. Sensing Magni's aura, Duque smiled. "Congratulations, demigod Magni." "Yes, thank you. I will be happier if there are no old friends with chainsaws trying to cut off my beard after I return." Jurbin rolled his eyes and muttered in a shrill voice, "Just a little, don't be so stingy." "Bullshit. The last time you said you wanted some dinosaur specimens, you cut off the thigh of a Tyrannosaurus rex." Magni exposed Jurbin on the spot. It was Duque who stopped the shortest dwarf. "If you can't cut his beard, you can ask him for his clothes or his nails." "Good idea." The craftsman immediately pulled on the motor rope of the chainsaw, and the chainsaw roared again. "Enough. Enough." Duque felt a headache coming on. "Let's talk business first." The leaders of the alliance gathered together. After everyone sat down, Magni stroked his stiff diamond beard. "Yes, first of all, I have to thank Duque for helping me make the arrangements. I am very happy that Steel Stove Castle did not fall into chaos. That's what I should do. After I went through the ascension ritual, the power of the earth changed my body permanently. This made my body beyond the realm of flesh and more like a part of the earth. I am different from Duque and the rest. I no longer have the biological structure of a human." Magni turned his head. "Muradin, you have done well these days. From now on, you will be the king of Steel Stove Castle." "Ah!" Muradin cried out in shock. "We dwarves are not long-lived beings that can live for tens of thousands of years. It is normal for the throne to change. Moreover, I look more like a statue than a dwarf. I am different from the 2 next door who look like humans but can still pretend to be mortals." Magni did not hold back as he ridiculed Duque and Queen Sylvanas. Duque was a little embarrassed while Queen Sylvanas giggled. "It is decided." Magni changed the topic. "I also heard the voice of Azeroth's will. She told me to bring a message to Duque and everyone. The Burning Legion is really coming again. Because Duque has led the Alliance to deal heavy losses to the Legion many times, the Legion's return will be later than expected. It will only come in about a year." "Oh, holy light. They really came. I almost thought they weren't coming." The leaders discussed among themselves. In the Alliance, Duque was known as the Prophet. He had predicted 25 years before the Dark Portal that the Legion would come in about 10 years. But the 10 years had passed and there was no sign of the demon army. Everyone could not help but mutter to themselves. In fact, there were already voices in the alliance that it was not beneficial to economic development to blindly carry out war preparations. Should more resources be mobilized to more convenient places? To be prepared for war, all important facilities had to be built deep in the mountains or underground. How could it be more convenient to dig a hole underground than to build on a plain? This was what Duque did not expect. After losing the tribe as an external enemy, the alliance was showing signs of slacking off. Magni's appearance had undoubtedly provided sufficient evidence to support Duque's prophecy. Magni's reputation among the dwarves was unparalleled. If the dwarves were to work at full force, then the alliance's war preparations would be at least half done. All right. I have more things to show everyone. Come everyone. Duque, open a portal to Otter. Unlike in history, the alliance was now on good terms with the Guardians of Otter. Seeing Duque and the rest arrive, the first to come out to welcome them was Mimiron, followed by Tarim. When they knew the destination of Magni and the rest, it was Mimiron who brought everyone to Otter's observatory. When they fought Otter back then, they knew that the observatory needed a key to open, and no one in this world seemed to know where the key was. There's not even a keyhole on the gate. How do we get in? Muradin asked. At this moment, Magni told everyone, "Idiot, I'm that key dash." Then Mimiron, whose brain circuit was different from others, summoned a huge robot that grabbed Magni and slammed him against the gate. "Idiot! Let go of me. I'll be near the gate." The diamond dwarf shouted as he struggled. After Mimiron's robot put Magni down, Magni chanted a passage in the earth elemental language that outsiders could not understand. Instantly, the huge disc above the gate moved. Chapter 1995. 4 tadpole-like runes that looked like yin and yang fish emitted different lights. Red gears, yellow lightning, green leaves, and a white blood flower that was exactly the same as the light on Magni's body. As the light bloomed, the mechanism of the door started to activate. It was very metaphysical. Duque muttered, "I wonder if the encryption method requires our quantum satellite?" Everyone followed the Diamond St. Magni in and immediately saw his old friend Orgarin. Although Duque could clearly see the label on his retina that this was not his real body but his echo, there was not much difference. This was Orgaron's will projected from an unknown corner of the universe. "It's you guys again?" Orgarin himself was a human figure that seemed to be formed from constellation lines and starlight. His expression was a little hazy, but it did not prevent everyone from seeing his expression as if he had just eaten a mouthful of hot shit. How could he be happy? Back then, it was this group of mortals who surrounded him and gave him a good beating. Only then did he send out a signal that this world was good and he didn't need to reset it. Who would have thought that the Azeroth Star Soul was also requested by the Titan who hadn't fully matured yet, and it was this group of little bastards. It would be strange if he was not angry. He was about to explode and lecture them. Duque spread his hands. "Yo Orgarin, it's been a long time. Oh, you're in Orion Alpha? Do you want me to open a portal to visit you now? It's very convenient." If Orgarin had a tongue, he would have bitten his own tongue. It was not easy for him to escape from this group of gods of plagues. Who knew that these gods of plagues were now so strong that no one could control them? With just one sense, he knew that Duque and the others had become stronger. Alright, he could not beat Duque and the others back then, and he could not beat them now. This was the tragedy of the Titan's creation. Basically, the upper limit of his strength was locked. Then he immediately realized something was wrong. He looked up in shock. When he spread his senses beyond the Azeroth atmosphere, he saw the third and fourth moon and a series of neatly arranged satellites hovering in the orbit of planet Azeroth. Olgaron was terrified. Although he looked serious and majestic on the surface, he was actually afraid and said, "Ahem, you have your mission and I have my duty. Let's get down to business." After exchanging some pleasantries, Olgarin opened his mouth and said, "It's because of you cheaters, shameless bastards that we weren't able to come this far. Otherwise, why would our boss Titan not be able to live to this day after creating so many things? Oh, you must be joking." The above was purely Duze's own translation. Olgarin's original words were a very official version of the story. "So, I really didn't expect you to develop to such an extent. Perhaps this is your flaw. Back then, the Titans gave you free will, allowing you to surpass the laws of the universe and survive. Normally, under the siege of the Burning Legion and the ancient gods, the calculated probability of your survival is infinitely close to zero. In the face of such a powerful enemy, even the most powerful of Titan's creations could not escape. Yet, you were able to survive and develop such a magnificent civilization. With such an alliance, we can tell you this planet and the ultimate secret of the Pantheon without any worries. This was the main point. Do you know why the Burning Legion attacked Azeroth? That's because the key to destroying the Burning Legion is in Azeroth, the Pillar of Creation. The Pillar of Creation? The mortal heroes were all dumbfounded. The name itself sounded like a high-end, grand, and high-class item. The Pillar of Creation is actually just a name. It is the divine weapon that the Titans used to create the world, and it is the key to fighting against the Burning Legion. These divine weapons are called the Pillars of Creation in Azeroth, and they have been obtained by people a long time ago. At this point, Olgaron looked at Duque. Duke Marcus, you should be familiar with these things, right? I can sense the aura of one of the Pillar of Creation on you. Duque acted out what it meant to be dazed for a moment, then as if he had just woken up from a dream, he lost it. Wait, are you talking about the Tear of Elun? Duque raised his hand, and a diamond-shaped red crystal-like object appeared in his right palm. It emitted a gentle wave of divine power. Everyone's jaw dropped. In Duque's harem chat group there was an uproar. Wait, wasn't this kept by Isra all this time? When did you get it? Tyron cried out on the spot. Ever since the cataclysm I asked Isra to come. Elun didn't object either. With this, I have a deeper understanding of the power of the gods. Duque pretended to be casual. No wonder you used such a short time to train from the demigod level to the peak of demigod level. Queen Sylvie suddenly realized. No, you're thinking too much. It's so cool to be the first mortal to become a demigod, to be able to occupy the most powerful divine weapon in Azeroth. Jaina was a little envious. No, I'm just occupying the most powerful harem in Azeroth. On the other side, Orgaren continued his explanation. There are 4 other pillars of creation-level divine weapons. They are Shield of Agrama, Tidal Stone, Hammer of Kaz, Garoth, and Eye of Amun, Thul. I'm not sure of their exact location, but I can tell you that I'm 100% sure that they are in Azeroth. Go. Heroes of the mortal world, do your best to resist the Burning Legion. When you gather all 5 pillars, you will be able to launch a counterattack. Don't be afraid and don't be discouraged. The Guardians of Azeroth will cooperate fully with you. I have already received a weak summon from the Pantheon. The signal is too weak and I can't be sure. Perhaps, on the day of the final battle, you will receive help from the Pantheon. Do your best. Mortals, according to your calculation method, you still have 360 days. After saying that, Orgaron's figure slowly faded into the void and disappeared without a trace. Just as all the big shots of the Alliance were still in shock, Duque let out a long sigh of relief. It was finally done. This was the last piece of the puzzle against the Burning Legion. That's right. The arrival of the Legion at this time was also the most glorious moment of the entire Azeroth. Capable people were everywhere and heroes were everywhere. When Odin, the boss of Odor, and the lords of the Pantheon arrived, this great era would officially begin. Chapter 1996. This was an era where divine weapons could be found everywhere. To put it in an exaggerated way, killing a pig in the enemy's lair in a random game could yield a divine weapon. Of course, that was just for show. To truly unleash the power of a divine weapon, it had to be recharged. A divine weapon that had not been recharged and had the power of the engravings was just a pile of scrap metal. At most it looked better. But to a salted fish, even a useless divine weapon was still a divine weapon. He could brag about it for the rest of his life and pass it down to his descendants as a family heirloom. Your grandfather. Back then there were a bunch of divine weapons. Look, the door panel of our house was made of the divine weapon tower shield. Divine weapons were the ultimate glory of an era, and also the greatest symbol of an era. Some might say that if divine weapons were common, would they still be divine weapons? Duque wanted to say, yes. Even if they were common, a divine weapon was still a divine weapon. Without these divine weapons, the mortals of Azeroth would not have the power to fight against hundreds of millions of demons, especially the elite demons. For normal demons, Duque relied on the technology tree in the Alliance to use all kinds of mass-produced black technology to make up for this disadvantage. But in the world of Azeroth, high-level mysteries would always crush low-level mysteries. Without enough energy, ordinary attacks would be useless against high-ranking demons. This was truly unscathed. Even the mandatory 1 HP reduction in the game didn't happen. Perhaps after this ultimate battle, most of the divine weapons that were temporarily created would lose their power and become ordinary metal. It was because of these timely divine weapons that the mortals had the possibility of defeating the terrifying Burning Legion. Orgaren was gone, and the war that involved the entire world of Azeroth was just about to begin. Witnessing and hearing the news of the Legion's return made the leaders of the various countries extremely nervous. After returning, there were no surprises. The Throne Conference passed the war mobilization motion. Sally's voice sounded in every communication channel in the Alliance again. Emergency broadcast. Emergency broadcast. Just 15 minutes ago, the leaders of the Alliance received accurate news from the Pantheon. The Burning Legion will descend on Azeroth in 360 days. The Throne Conference has passed an emergency motion. The entire Alliance will immediately enter a state of Level 1 combat readiness. From now on, the Alliance will prohibit the sale of food, wine, and alcoholic beverages. The military factory will immediately adjust the production plan. Within 3 days, 3 shifts will be in operation 24 hours a day. The final battle had finally arrived. Everyone knew enough about the return of the army. It could even be said that the Alliance had been waiting for this day for too long. When the news was confirmed, many people didn't panic. Instead, they felt a sense of relief. If they succeeded, their race would continue to multiply. Even if they didn't have 1,000 generations, they would at least be carefree for 100 years. If they failed, the world would be destroyed and everyone would be finished. There were no rousing slogans, only a calm crowd that began to move towards the barracks and factories in an orderly manner. Even if they weren't on duty, everyone wanted to know what would happen next. In the final days of peace, the Alliance survived 35 years of the Door of Darkness. The 1st of April, year 36 of the Dark Portal. It was a rather amusing day for Duque. Duque suddenly sensed something. Almost at the same time, Nozdormu sent a telepathic message. Duque, can you feel it? Yes. My strength is still okay. No, it's better to let it out. It's impossible to guard against it for thousands of years. There will always be a time when you are weak or when the mortals show a flaw. Instead of pretending that it's scabies, it's better to bear the pain and get rid of it. Whether the wound becomes a fatal wound and dies, or whether the rotten flesh is cut off and completely healed, it all depends on our hard work and luck. After all, the intelligent races of the mortal world weren't created by the Titans. Strictly speaking, the Titans' creation was indeed very perfect. They could perform their duties for tens of thousands of years. They wouldn't feel bored, nor would they feel that anything was wrong. Because in their way of thinking, there was no such thing as freedom. Even their way of thinking was fixed. Mortals weren't the same. Freedom gave the intelligent races of the mortal world all kinds of imaginative ideas and magical creativity. At the same time, it stripped them of their stability. This was like the story of the boy who cried wolf. 1 or 2 stern warnings would wake them up. But as time passed, they would unknowingly become slack. To be able to make the entire Alliance operate efficiently, with everyone working together and persisting in high-intensity labor and preparation for war for 10 years was already quite the limit. Frankly speaking, if the Burning Legion didn't come, the taut string in the hearts of the people would either break or they would secretly relax. Now I was just right. In the past, Duque didn't know how the Burning Legion would come to Azeroth. According to the original history, Ghoul, Dan in the parallel world of the King of Draenor, was still alive and kicking. Then he crossed time and space, rolled from the magically modified Draenor to Azeroth, and opened the ancient portal that had been sealed for a long time. That was the portal that was opened in the ancient war. Here came the problem. The Ghoul, Dan in the timeline of this world was long dead. His head was cut off and hollowed out. He was first given to Nuzul as a magic artifact, Ghoul, Dan's skull. Not long after, Nuzul kicked Duque and sent him flying to Draenor, blowing up Draenor. What was amazing was that this thing blew up most of Draenor. Under the protection of Kill Jaden's power, this magic artifact was actually fine. Then it fell into the hands of Illidan. Ghoul, Dan's skull, also fell into the hands of Duque after Illidan was defeated and captured. Duque threw it directly into the Light's Hope Chapel and let Alonsis fail and the others seal it for a long time. After unifying the 4 major elemental realms, Duque was worried that this thing would become a scourge, so he directly used the ultimate flame of the Land of Fire to destroy this skull. Now, the one who broke through the void and stepped out of the portal was shockingly Dan. Oh Ghoul, Dan. Having just stepped out of the chaos of time and space, Ghoul, Dan's nerves were in a state of disorder. He was unable to immediately notice Nozdormu and Duque's spying. Duque asked Nozdormu, "Where did this guy come from?" Nozdormu's voice was like a whisper. "This Ghoul, Dan comes from a world in a parallel timeline that I don't know about. Hell, I feel the power of the fallen me in him. When Duque heard this, he almost bit off his own tongue. Right. Duque and Queen Sylvanas traveled through time and space and almost unified all the timelines where Azeroth had spread out. This almost did not include the timeline where Nozdormu fell and became the Eternal Dragon King. Obviously, the fallen Nozdormu in the future had tricked Azeroth. Chapter 1997. What should we do? Nozdormu asked Duque. The army will come eventually. Let Ghoul, Dan do it. Are you sure you're not playing with fire? Nozdormu's tone was stern when he asked this question. Duque chuckled and gave Nozdormu an answer using a secret code. In Nozdormu's illusory projection, his elven face suddenly became very interesting. You have already calculated everything? O Titans, are you the king of space and time or am I? Nozdormu was indignant. Stop talking nonsense. Are you going to give it to me or not? Sigh. Up to you. The fate of Azeroth is in the hands of the mortal races. Nozdormu did not care anymore. 30 minutes later, the entire Alliance's defense system was ringing with warning sirens. Stormwind City, Stormwind Fortress. Although it looked like an old-fashioned fortress, it was no longer the same. The outer layer of the fortress was covered with a new type of alloy mixed with nether iron from Pandaria. The outer wall was a meter thick and could easily withstand the attacks of TNT cannons below 300 millimeters. Moreover, the fortress was just a cover and entrance. The real command center had been placed 200 meters below the Stormwind Fortress. Abnormal spatial fluctuations. Report from the surveillance ship. Seismic waves detected. There's no mistake. The depth is less than 50 meters, almost on the surface. The location is in the middle of the endless ocean, confirmed to be the location of the Broken Isles. 10 minutes later. Report. We have a real-time image from the Broken Isles. The energy storm above the Broken Isles has weakened. Our surveillance ship has sent an optical image. Demons from the Burning Legion. Terra Guardians and Apocalypse Guards detected 1,000, 2,000, and still increasing. Confirmed the Burning Legion's Abyssal Lord. 3. Presumed to be an intermediate Void Lord. Terror Lords detected, unable to match with the known list. Number 5, presumed to be 2 mid-tier and 3 low-tier Void Lords. Shadow element concentration on the Broken Isles rapidly increasing. Report, we have lost optical image. Surveillance ship Alpha confirmed safe for now. Half an hour ago, all the leaders and generals of the Alliance received a warning from Duque's invasion. They all knew that their commander was an almighty being. While they were surprised, they quickly got into the zone and waited for the final confirmation. In fact, many leaders had already entered battle positions. The frontline commanders such as Varian and Kale, had already arrived at Naxxramas, which was hovering above the east of the Broken Islands, as well as the Dalajan in the west. The magic of the weave gave them the ability to float in the air for long periods of time. If not for the weave's carrying capacity, Duque wouldn't mind turning all the ships into flying battleships. In reality, it was more economical to use a warship on the sea. Sitting in the command post on Naxxramas, Duque looked at the fog-shrouded beach and couldn't help but think of the original history. On the broken beach, the Alliance and the Horde suffered the most tragic defeat in history. The master thief of MI7, Matthias Shaw, who had never failed, was tricked for the first time. He and his elite intelligence personnel were directly captured and controlled, and sent misleading information to Stormwind City, which directly led to the crushing defeat of the Alliance and the Horde coalition forces. Varian Rin and Wajin, the two leaders of the Alliance and the Horde, died in battle on the same day. It brought indelible losses to the Alliance and the Horde. In addition, the death of the Empress Dowager, Tyrion Fordring, made countless people of the Alliance shed tears. Since it was a certain transmigrator who had the final say here, there would naturally be no such thing. Duque's voice began to broadcast throughout the Alliance's military communication network. Where there was a magic mirror, countless soldiers formed circles and quietly looked at the commander who had an ageless face. Duque raised his head, his eyes full of determination. His gaze was so deep that it gave people a sense of confidence that he could see through the past and the future, and that he had the next 5,000 years in his hands. The Burning Legion is here. Just as the Alliance had been announcing. Everything that needed to be said had been said. Everything that needed to be prepared has been prepared. Before the war, the last thing I want to say is, since the beginning of the Dark Portal, the people of Azeroth have suffered enough. If the Alliance from 30 years ago had to face the main force of the Burning Legion, I would have all kinds of worries and fears. Because at that time the alliance was too young, and the long period of peace had numbed everyone's nerves. But now we are definitely different. Look around you, what do you see? The most advanced weapons. The most complete preparation. The most extensive and powerful allies. 30 years. We have faced the unprecedented green tide of orcs, resisted the Lich King's undead army, killed the vanguard of the Burning Legion, and destroyed the ancient god and his servants. Believe me and believe in yourselves. This is just another test of survival and destruction. I firmly believe that the people of the Alliance and even the entire Azeroth will cross this hurdle. There is only one reason. At this point, Duque suddenly paused. Then, it was as if all the air in their lungs was squeezed out, turning into a roar, turning into a thunderous roar that exploded in the ears of every Alliance soldier. Because, we have been through hundreds of battles. We are invincible. In an instant, the blood in the hearts of the millions of Alliance soldiers was ignited, turning into endless motivation that ran through every blood vessel in their bodies. It was so surging, so shocking. The passion that erupted like a volcano could not be suppressed at all. In the Eastern Kingdom, in Northrend, in Kalimdor, in Pandaria, outside the vortex of the endless ocean, every place with Alliance soldiers let out the same heaven-shaking roar. We have been through hundreds of battles. We are invincible. The raised fists represented the unyielding spirit of the many intelligent beings of Azeroth. Facing evil, we will never yield. Hearing the shouts from every corner of the magic net, feeling the roar that even the sturdy walls of the stronghold could not block, everyone in the command center was so excited that they could not control themselves. Duque waved his hand. Alliance soldiers. Attack! 8,000 of the latest flying battleships and 22,000 ships on the sea all sailed towards the Broken Islands. This shocking number, this attack speed, even Ghoul Dan, who had expected this world's alliance to fight to the death, was momentarily stunned. What kind of joke is this? Where did the alliance get so many soldiers? Chapter 1998. 30,000 warships was an unscientific number to begin with. Normally, only if Duque stuffed everyone in the alliance would they be able to operate such a number of warships. After all, with the technological level of the Alliance during World War II, a destroyer needed at least 200 people to operate, and 350 was the standard. A main battleship often needed around 2,000 people. But this was an unscientific fantasy world. Weren't there only a few titans in the Pantheon? They could make titan creations. Duque had cheated. For example, on the Alliance's Z-class destroyer, there were people running around everywhere. If one looked carefully, it wouldn't be hard to find that there were very few humans. On the ship, there were more mechanical gnomes with a metallic luster and iron dwarves. That's right, these guys were robots from Odor's Mimiron workshop. The mechanical gnomes with simple intelligence were competent for maintenance and other tasks. As long as the ship's blueprints were inputted into their brains and they had enough materials, they could complete damage control and other tasks. As for the iron dwarves with thick arms, they were the best workers. Carrying cannonballs was a cinch for them. As long as they had a commander, all the transportation work could be easily done. The only problem was that they had to recharge their batteries. After cutting off a large number of unnecessary manpower, what the intelligent races really needed to do was to fire the cannons, sonar, radar, and command. After a significant reduction, a 120-meter-long destroyer only needed 56 living people. Or not necessarily alive. It would be fine if they were the Forsaken. Even the largest battleship like the Bismarck only needed 300 people. This was completely unimaginable 5 years ago. Working with Odor, especially after Orgaren opened up the authority of the Protectors, creating a cannon fodder army of mechanical gnomes wasn't a problem at all. In the past few years, Mimiron's workshop had been operating at full speed, and this was the result. Should he learn about Odor Morph? As for shipbuilding, should he learn about Titan Crafting's 3D printed parts? They directly mined high-grade ores in no cent, refined the ores locally, and produced the flying battleships locally. The flying battleships built in Mimiron's workshop were far better than the steel battleships and bunkers built in the Eastern Kingdom. Later on, other than Iron Furnace Fort, all the other major port cities in the Alliance turned to building ships. On the other hand, the Alliance's main cities focused on the relatively simple flying frigates and destroyers. A smile appeared on Duque's face. It was hilarious to think about the history. The number of people from the Alliance and the Horde who could land on the Broken Beach was less than 2,000. Even if they were all elites like the Paladins of the Silver Hand, it would not be surprising for them to be wiped out under the attack of the Sea of Demons. But now, I'm sorry, but the Alliance definitely has the upper hand on the battlefield. The fleet here wasn't the entire Alliance, and of course it wasn't the entire Burning Legion. It didn't matter how many billions of demons there were in the Burning Legion as long as you could come over. A dozen Alliance single-propeller fighter jets were the first to arrive at the Broken Beach airspace. These were the P-51 Mustang fighter jets created by Duque. Duque had risen to power in the 15th year of the Dark Portal, and it had taken him 10 years to allow the Alliance to climb the technological tree from the wooden warships of the Olden Era to the era of steel warships. Many of the technologies were missing or temporarily stuck. It took another 10 years for the uneven development of the military technology tree to reach the level of Earth's World War II. It wasn't that the Alliance didn't have faster fighter jets, but they weren't real fighter jets. They were modified from the magic net, and they consumed a lot of wind elements. Even if Duque controlled the 4 elements of Azeroth, he couldn't use a large amount of the elements on the fighter jets. The speed of the P-51 Mustang was definitely enough, and the main point was to break through defenses. The rumbling in the sky attracted Ghoul Dan's attention. He raised his head and looked in the direction of the sound with his crooked eyes. There were 2 fighter jets in a group, and a total of 8 fighter jets were arranged in a herringbone formation. This formation couldn't be a coincidence. Also, HM? The speed it's so fast. Even though Ghoul Dan was a powerful lackey of the Burning Legion, his position was at most that of a low-level Void Lord. If it wasn't for the power that killed Jaden had given him, the demons around him wouldn't even care about him. Tiske. Ghoul Dan leaned on the skeletal staff that was like a walking stick and took a deep breath. He had already realized that the Alliance had definitely come prepared. The idea of setting up a trap on the Broken Beach to trap the Alliance and the Horde was destroyed before it even started. Take them down. Ghoul Dan raised his skeletal staff, and instantly dozens of Eridar warlocks took over. As the elites of the Eridar tribe, the standards of the Eridar Magi were already quite shocking. Furthermore, on the Broken Islands, the shadow energy that was emitted from the Tomb of Sargeras made them even more powerful. The Mustang was indeed very powerful, but it depended on who the opponent was. If it was an opponent with similar technology like a propeller-type fighter jet, it could easily defeat most of the Earth's World War II fighter jets. But if it was something from the mystical side, they wouldn't be able to go against it. Even if the elemental radar on the aircraft suddenly sounded an alarm, most of the pilots' reactions were a beat slower. The shadow elements suddenly gathered in the sky, forming a sticky space. When the fighter jet crashed into it, it was like falling into the sea. The sudden change in density caused more than 10 Mustang jets to be smashed to pieces on the spot. Only the ace pilot flying at the back pulled the lever to the limit, causing the high-speed fighter jet to fly in the largest arc, narrowly avoiding the death trap. That was enough. They were here to scout. Pegasus 05 has discovered the enemy, it's the Burning Legion. The coastline is different from the original map, now corrected to X. Nothing was more important than first-hand information on the coastline. When the second battle of the Dark Portal had ended, Ghoul Dan had come to the Tomb of Sargeras on the Broken Islands. The Broken Islands had actually existed in the center of the Endless Sea for the past 10,000 years, but it was surrounded by a huge whirlpool. The people inside couldn't leave and the people outside couldn't enter. Even though the Alliance had developed flying ships, they still couldn't change this situation. The terrifying elemental undulations from the huge whirlpool formed a hurricane, which could easily destroy flying ships and ships on the sea. Ghoul Dan had come here more than 30 years ago and he had also lost an entire fleet. But after he arrived, he used his evil power to raise part of the land that had sunk to the bottom of the sea. This was the Broken Beaches of today. The Alliance seriously lacked the geographical data of the Broken Beaches. Without this, they couldn't determine the shooting data, and there was no way to talk about long-range bombing. The Alliance sacrificed their reconnaissance planes to obtain the most precious first-hand information. Chapter 1999. Reporting: we've received the latest data. Calibrate, then test the main cannon of the 7th Fleet, Marshal Taylor ordered. 30 seconds later, the 7th Fleet in the east of the Broken Beach began to fire. The 3 460mm cannons roared, and after a minute, the huge metal shells crossed the distance of 30,000 meters and began to fall on the Broken Beach. Seeing the high-speed shells in the distance, Ghoul Dan instinctively felt that something was wrong. This Ghoul Dan was not the Ghoul Dan who had only experienced the first and second battles of the Dark Portal. He was the King of Draenor, who had experienced a branch timeline. Because he was born in a branch timeline, His strength could not compare to the original ghoul, Dan, at this point in time. Just because he was not strong enough did not mean that he was not knowledgeable enough. After seeing the advanced technology that the goblins had passed on to the beastmen ghoul, Dan immediately jumped up. Stop them. Stop those things. If the shells were so easy to stop, they wouldn't be shells. With an initial speed of 780 meters per second, coupled with the extreme speed and destructive power produced by the acceleration of gravity, how could it be so easy to stop them? Even though hundreds of Apocalypse guards hurriedly flew into the air, only a few succeeded. Huge metal shadows swept past the demons' retinas and crashed into the ground beside them. The smaller and more agile demons could still dodge subconsciously. The huge lords of the abyss had no place to dodge. They were practically born as meat shields. Boom, boom, boom. A series of loud noises rang out. If it was a mortal's eardrums, they would definitely be pierced. The continuous explosions spread along the entire coastline and into the depths of the broken beach. Countless sand and large rocks were lifted from the beach, mixed with seawater and torn flesh. Some Apocalypse guards fluttered their wings in panic and retreated at a speed of tens of meters per second, but they were still caught up by the explosions and swallowed up. A certain lord of the abyss was hit by a large caliber shell. Its fat dragon-shaped lower body swelled up like a balloon and then exploded. Flesh and blood flew everywhere. With this as the background, more and more demons were blown into the sky. Enemy attack. Mainly physical attacks. There's also a considerable amount of fire elemental attacks. Ghoul, Dan was a demigod warlock. Even if he was reduced to a dog, his life-saving abilities were still considered strong among demigods. He immediately sacrificed a void demon to form a powerful shadow shield to block the shockwaves of the explosion. He also used the Hellhound's super magic resistance to resist the damage of the fire elements. The other demons were not as arrogant as him. Most demons did not like to use shields. Their tyrannical physiques and natural elemental resistance were the best shields. Now they were paying with their lives for neglecting to defend. Bastard. Wizards. Where are the wizards? Our covert operation has failed. We need to set up the magic formation and shield immediately. We can't let the enemy's shells hit our vanguard unscrupulously. Ghoul, Dan roared in anger. All demons, adjust your resistances if you can. Whether it was a magic array or a large-scale war spell, the most important thing was time. Unfortunately, the Alliance wouldn't give him time to react. This time, a strange phenomenon appeared in the western sky. Countless golden arrows of light fell from the sky like fireworks, turning into a golden rain that rained down. The leaders of the Throne Conference maintained a constant connection. Of course, Duque was also connected to a special magic communication network for his harem. In this network, Elugia exclaimed, "So beautiful!" Kalia, who knew next to nothing about war, became a rare expert. Right. These new shells are called missiles. Yes, they're the East Wind Type 3 Holy Light missiles. Huh. How did you remember? Hey, I once asked Duque why the Alliance's new missiles were called the East Wind series, Kalia said with admiration. Duque suddenly recited a poem to me. The east wind night blooms on 1,000 trees, and when it blows, stars fall like rain. Wow. So poetic. It wasn't just Elugia. A few girls exclaimed as well. So beautiful. I didn't think that Duque could use a poem to describe the scene of a missile tearing through the sky and entering the battlefield, Tyron praised sincerely. Duque looked like he was constipated. God damn it, when Kalia asked him, he just happened to be in his sage time. A man in his sage time could easily think about life. Who knew what had gotten into him to suddenly think of this? Alright, he even became famous. Now that his sister praised him, Duque thought about it and apologized in his heart. He decided to secretly press down the coffin of a certain Chinese poet with the surname Xin. Whoosh whoosh whoosh, the holy light suddenly shot out, and the shadow fog that had just risen into the air was cancelled out by the holy light of the opposite attribute. The demons, who had barely managed to survive the torrential rain of cannonballs, had their bodies completely pierced through. They fell heavily and rolled awkwardly on the muddy beach floor, howling in pain. Blue-black demon blood flowed to the ground and mixed with the seawater, turning into a thick, stinky liquid. No. This can't go on. Where are those bastards' fleets? Ghoul, Dan shouted. They're almost there. One of the demons acting as his assistant had an undisguised look of disdain. The void battlefield outside Azeroth's atmosphere had been the battlefield of the Pentashade dragons for the past 25,000 years. They abided by the mission given to them by the Titans, and never retreated even in death. However, as the power of the 5 dragon aspects of the sleeping dragon temple weakened, and the pentashade dragons suffered heavy losses in many battles, the protection circle of planet Azeroth was different from the one in history. It could be said that it was still there, but in reality, its effectiveness had been greatly reduced. It wasn't even 30% of its peak. Now, on planet Azeroth's orbit there was something unusual. Since ancient times there had only been 2 moons in Azeroth. Now there were 4. The other 2 were not natural celestial bodies, and of course they were not the Titan's creations. It was Elune who had spent a lot of effort and used her divine power to catch 2 comets that passed by Azeroth, and without affecting the rotation of Azeroth, she brought them into the planet's gravitational circle. At this moment, all the mages who were monitoring the space outside Azeroth's atmosphere through the magic network were alarmed at the same time. In the huge celestial body that was jokingly called the Third Moon by the Alliance, there was a very modern command post. It became noisy inside. Alert! Alert! The Burning Legion's Void Fleet has been discovered. The number is 2,000, 3,000, and still increasing. They are all star destroyers. Strangely, all the staff inside were fire demons. Chapter 2000. Monitoring templates were made with fire demons that were 4 or 5 meters tall, with elemental conduction as the transmission method, and arcane magic mirrors. Every fire demon was busy in front of their control panel. Majordomo Executus, the commander of the fortress, even had to face more than 100 mirror screens to deal with different situations. Even Duque, who had seen this scene with his own eyes, wondered if he had entered the wrong set and gone to Star Wars. In fact, this was not the same thing. Azeroth needed protection. At this point in history, the dragon sleeping temple had collapsed, and of the original 5 dragon aspects, only Alexstrasza and Izura were left. The planet's protection array had failed. The Burning Legion's planet destroyers could land wherever they wanted. Duque once complained that the Burning Legion spaceship, which couldn't blow up a planet with one shot, had the nerve to be called a planet destroyer. Later Duque understood. Not everyone who stuck their penis in the ground would be the same as Ux the entire planet. Humans couldn't. Planet destroyers could. Think about it, how did the Burning Legion use this triangular cone-shaped planet destroyer in history? The bow of the ship fell down and plunged into the ground, and then the portal on the ship opened, through which thousands of demon soldiers were released. Wasn't this like rape? They just stuck it in and shot out a bunch of crap, polluting the enemy. Thinking of this, Duque felt that the planet destroyer was worthy of its name. In history, the Burning Legion used this trick to turn Azeroth upside down. Think about it, in Azeroth, where there were no large-scale flying ships and few mages, they just dropped a planet destroyer in a random no-man's land. If left alone, tens of thousands of demons would appear one day later. They might not be able to deal with it even if they sent 100,000 troops. If left alone, Azeroth would be destroyed. This was even more disgusting than the Scourge. The Burning Legion could parachute wherever they wanted, and the Alliance and the Horde who lacked mobility could only watch. Duque really didn't know how the Alliance and the Horde survived the original spacetime. Since Duque was here, of course it had to be changed. The so-called Third Moon was a relatively round comet. The widest part was 10 kilometers and the narrowest part was 2 kilometers. The Third Moon looked like a huge fireball. A huge amount of fire elements covered the entire celestial body. In the universe, unless it was a star that emitted light and heat on its own, the terrifying vacuum would absorb all energy and annihilate all flames. When Duque first proposed this idea, almost all of his allies objected, thinking that Duque was being too whimsical. Duque had engraved a giant Titan runic magic array inside the comet, giving it gravity. At the same time, he connected the Azeroth weave to the comet, allowing the fire elemental energy in the Land of Flames to enter the comet through the spatial tunnel. When Elune used her divine power to fix the comet in the orbit of planet Azeroth, and used the power of the Moon Goddess to restrain the leakage of fire elements, a space fortress was born. Dumok named it the City of Condors in a very bad taste. The only problem was that it was impossible for mortals to operate such a huge elemental fortress. Just the vacuum of outer space was enough to kill all mortals. Originally, Duke wanted the Draenei to contribute an airship as the core, but the Draenei, who were lacking in space technology, said they could not do it. In the end, Duque waved his hand and let the fire demons do the work. Anyway, elemental creatures wouldn't die as long as the elements in their bodies weren't exhausted. Hence this scene happened. Target, Burning Legion's planet destroyer fleet. Executus ordered. Target locked. Very good. Wrath of the Fire God, launch. The proud fire demon leader waved his arm heavily. In terms of fighting and hacking, he was absolutely third-rate. Ever since he followed Duque, his status hadn't been low. Now this position was more suitable for him to use his strengths. Every fire demon cannoneer could clearly see the dazzling crimson beam of light shooting towards the planet destroyer battleships. This was really a terrifying scene. It violently impacted the minds of everyone in the Alliance headquarters in the Eastern Kingdom who was watching this scene. At this moment, the Burning Legion fleet was dumbfounded. The demons had been fighting with the five-colored dragon guardian of Azeroth for almost 25,000 years. They had lost countless times under the planetary defense arrays, but they had never been attacked from a distance of 1,000 kilometers. Of course, they were curious about why there were 2 more moons in Azeroth, but they didn't expect this to happen. After years of fighting, they had long known the strength of the five-colored dragon guardian. If they didn't enter the void battlefield area, at least 100 kilometers away from the five-colored dragon guardian's void fortress, there wouldn't be any dragons attacking them. This scene subverted all their knowledge and imagination. In the front of the Legion fleet, more than 100 planet destroyers that were directly hit by the main cannon of the city of Condors disappeared in an instant. The excessive high temperature and high concentration of fire elemental energy made it so that they didn't even have time to explode. After the organic and inorganic matter evaporated together, only complete nothingness was left. As for whether the demons on the ships would have a chance to resurrect, only God knew. The explosion occurred in the rear, in the second row of the Legion fleet. Some of the explosions occurred in the left and right rows that were not directly hit. The ships further out were also affected by the irresistible energy shockwaves and shook out of order. What an idiotic rookie captain. He drove the starship to the edge of the sun and was affected by the solar wind. In the communication circuit of the first ship that hit Yusheng, it was filled with wails and screams. The warlocks of Eridar were all cursing. What's going on? How can the natives of Azeroth have such advanced space weapons? Have they analyzed the technology of the Pantheon? Impossible. We spent 10,000 years and barely analyzed 80% of the functions of the planet destroyer. We can't even stabilize the main cannon. How can those ignorant natives have this kind of ability? What should we do? Continue? Idiot. Do you want to pay for all of Master Sargeraz's planet destroyers? This was the weakness of the Burning Legion. That's right, as long as the demon's soul was not destroyed, his soul could theoretically return to the distorted nether and resurrect infinitely. They were the most powerful cannon fodder in the world. No race could stop them in an infinite number of battles. But the planet destroyers were not infinite. The technology of the Pantheon's planet destroyers was many times higher than that of the Eridar wizards. It was a level of technology that could not be kept up with. They could not even look up to it. The army had spent 25,000 years and had not been able to replicate even a prototype ship, let alone mass-produce it. Chapter 2001. 1138 Planet Destroyers. That was the damage caused by the Vulcan's wrath. Such a devastating blow made the souls of the Burning Legion's Void Dukes tremble. It's impossible for a cannon of this level to recharge quickly. Let's take the chance and destroy this fortress. A Void Duke suggested. He was about to be slapped in the face. The elemental fluctuations of the opponent's fortress are intensifying. Obviously, the opponent's fortress is connected to the fire elemental realm. Recharging. That's fast. They can probably recharge a second time in 200 seconds. Eridar's analysts expressed their opinions. 200 seconds for one time? How were they supposed to fight that? The entire Burning Legion had less than 20,000 starships. There were only about 12,000 planet destroyers with assault capabilities. The rest were all normal starships that could not be equipped with mobile teleportation doors. They did not have much firepower or defense. They were similar to the starships that Neru and Willen used to lead the Drenii to escape. They were purely used for transportation, but their strategic value was better than nothing. Usually, the army had strict limits on the damage of planet destroyers. If they lost 2 planet destroyers while attacking a normal planet, the commander's soul would be ripped out and sent to kill Jaden's flame cage to howl for eternity. This is not the end of it. I don't believe that the fire element on planet Azeroth is infinite. Furthermore, how can a fortress defend an entire planet? The Void Dukes did not believe it. They took a big detour and came to the other side of planet Azeroth. As expected, the fortress that looked like a small sun could not follow them. However, there was another dark blue fortress on the other side of the planet. It was almost black. Let's give it a try. This time the army's fleet learned their lesson. They sent out 600 planet destroyers to form an umbrella shape. They widened the distance between the ships and slowly surrounded the fortress. Then they ran into a fortress that looked like a hedgehog. It was a very strange attack method. Countless icicles condensed from frost elements appeared strangely in the void around the fortress, pouring firepower on the Star Destroyer in a way that had almost no blind spots. Don't panic. Switch to the elemental vision. The more experienced Eridar wizards quickly mastered it. When one's field of vision changed from ordinary light absorption to perception element, one would discover that at the center of this fortress that was roughly 15 kilometers in diameter, there were countless elemental channels of varying thickness and thinness that were like tree roots extending outwards. These twisting elemental veins formed a complex and ever-changing elemental energy projection network. It's the elemental passage of the frost element. The Void Dukes concluded. We can attack. The frost elemental was different from the other elements. It was not suitable to be used as the main cannon of the stronghold. Frost elementals freeze too easily, which limits their range, Mavelin's Shivala's matriarch judged. The Fell Lord, Zakam, made the decision. 2,000 assault ships as the vanguard, close in like an umbrella. The main force of the planet destroyers will hold the rear, and we will take this fortress in one fell swoop. The two satellite fortresses on either side of planet Azeroth were too much for the Burning Legion to handle. If both strongholds were there, the Burning Legion would be at a disadvantage. They could only break through the blind spot between the two strongholds. Not only was it narrow, but there were also other satellites. 12 satellites that were only 1 kilometer in diameter emitted a dazzling metallic reflection under the sun. No one knew how the people of Azeroth did it, but this mirror-like armor should not exist in the world. This probably had nothing to do with the indigenous civilization. It was more like a creation of the Titans. The mirror-like spheres glowed in a moving neon light, looking almost noble and elegant. But in fact, they were powerful killing devices that were connected to the magic net. Their existence perfectly made up for the blind spots of the two fortresses. This was also why the Burning Legion would rather attack one of the fortresses. If they chose to attack these small satellites, they would most likely be attacked by the two fortresses. After all, no one could guarantee that the stronghold cannons only had a range of 1,000 kilometers. The Burning Legion's assault had achieved some results. It seemed that the composition of this fortress was different from the other fire element fortress. The low mobility of the frost element meant that although the firepower of this fortress covered a wide range, the range of single element attacks was very short. Ah, this fortress isn't that hard to deal with. Zakam laughed loudly. On the other side, in Shivala's fleet, Matriarch Mavelin's had a different opinion. Be careful. Since the natives of Azeroth are relying on it, there must be a reason. Don't be like those rash fools. Even though the Burning Legion's fleet appeared to be advancing on the left and lagging behind on the right, after 2 hours of cruising and pressing, there were still 500 assault ships approaching the dark blue fortress that seemed to have a liquid surface. As long as we enter close combat, that's the Burning Legion's world. Zakam roared. Unbeknownst to them, a haughty and valiant figure in the dark blue stronghold let out a disdainful snort. She was Servanas. As an elemental demigod, she did not need to breathe. Breathing was a habit she had developed over thousands of years. Gently twirling her golden hair with her left index finger, Sylvanas remembered the name of this fortress. That bastard Duque was unexpectedly stubborn when it came to naming new things. Originally, since this was a fortress for her use, it had to be named Sindorii, or Windrunner, or something. In the end, Duque F** ked Sylvanas for 3 days and forced her to give in. Of course, Sylvanas was so prideful that she would definitely not tell others about this. She waved her hand. Izaran Fortress, heed my command. Prepare, Thor's hammer. The high-level wind elementals below immediately began to operate. Thousands of elemental circuits suddenly opened, and shocking elemental energy surged out of the tunnel connected to the wind god's throne. If converted into electricity, it would be a terrifying amount of energy measured in units of megawatts. When all the wind elementals turned into lightning and gathered at the forefront of the fortress near the enemy fleet, shock froze on the faces of the Void Dukes for the first time. Damn. What is this? Longsong cannons? No. This thing is even more powerful than the previous one. This time, a huge beam of light surrounded by purple-blue lightning shot from the Izaran fortress toward the Burning Legion fleet. Like a sharp cone piercing through paper, it pierced through the energy shields and composite armor of the assault ships and planet destroyers, causing a violent internal explosion. Small white light bubbles quickly appeared in space, and the people in the Izaran fortress could see the scene on the screen. These light bubbles extended into the depths of the void, and the energy waves caused by their simultaneous explosion looked like a galaxy. Of course, this also meant that in this instant the Burning Legion lost thousands of battleships and millions of demons. Chapter 2002. Ah, great. Well done. Destroy those damn demons? Whether it was the Alliance people who saw this scene from the monitoring center on the ground, or the 5-color dragons on standby in the Void Fortress, they all cheered and praised. It had been 25,000 years. There used to be so many 5-color dragons that they blotted out the sky. Under the effect of the anti-titans and the magic array that targeted the demons, the Burning Legion could only make minor harassment attacks. After the Gate of Darkness, the losses of the dragons increased day by day. It took too much time and energy for the 5-color dragons to cultivate an adult dragon. The war could not keep up with the consumption at all. The absence or weakening of the 5 guardian dragons led to the reduction of the restraints of the magic array on the demons, which in turn increased the losses of the 5-color dragons. In front of the demons who had infinite recovery power, this was simply a vicious cycle. Originally, Alexstrasza had already made a general mobilization order to fight to the last soldier. As long as they did not fall, the nature imprinted in their souls would drive them to do so. This was the corresponding price that the Titans had to pay to awaken their wisdom from the ignorant and primitive ancestor dragons and promote them to the 5-color dragons. The existence of the Alliance's Void Fortress perfectly filled the gap in the Void Battlefield's combat power of the dragons. The dazzling lightning ran through the front and middle of the entire Burning Legion Void fleet. Even though the Void Lords had scattered the formation of the fleet, the damage caused by the chain spread of the lightning still shocked the entire Burning Legion. The Burning Legion had traveled across the universe in the past 25,000 years and destroyed countless galaxies. The number of planet destroyers they had lost was only a little more than 300. Today was definitely a day of suffering for the planet destroyers. 2 shots of the main cannons directly turned more than 5,000 planet destroyers into space garbage. What made the Burning Legion even more desperate was that the Iserlohn fortress really finished charging in 4 minutes and gave the fleet a second shot of Mjolnir. At this moment, the Void Lords really knew that this was not a universe fortress connected to the water elemental realm at all, but a compound fortress connected to both the water and wind elemental realms. When the second shot of Mjolnir swept through the entire vanguard force and the core force of the Legion fleet twice, even the ferocious demons began to collapse. The ferocity of the 2 satellite fortresses disrupted the entire army's attack plan. Only Duque, Queen Sylvanas and Kale, that heaved a sigh of relief. They had finally tricked the army. At the end of the day, be it the so-called Condor City or Iseron Fortress, they were all products whose technology was not up to standard, and they had been forcibly made up for with magic. Let's not talk about whether the short-range anti-air firepower on the fortress would be enough after the enemy had broken through to close range. The number of soldiers in the fortress was definitely not enough to defend against any of the Burning Legion's demon divisions. The stronghold wasn't complete and didn't have a sealed environment. This directly reduced the number of races and manpower available. He didn't even need to think about it. He could only use elemental creatures. Low-level elemental creatures without intelligence could not effectively resist the demon army. It was bound to be filled with a large number of highly intelligent elemental creatures, such as the fire demons. Moreover, such a large fortress would require more than 100,000 short-range cannons of various calibers. Otherwise, there would be gaps in the firepower network. Once they entered close combat, they would still be finished. Furthermore, Azeroth didn't have an endless supply of elementals. The seemingly invincible main cannon of the fortress fired 2 consecutive shots from Mjolnir, which consumed 10% of the wind elements that could be controlled by the entire Azeroth. In reality, in order to maintain the balance of the world, the maximum loss of any element could not exceed 30%. Otherwise, it would cause the elements to become chaotic and collapse, causing another great cataclysm. Fortunately, because the Void Dukes had brains, they were stunned by Duque's all-out attack. On the second day they gave up on attacking the 2 fortresses. Instead, they began to break through the blind spots of the 2 satellites. Those were the 2 meridians of Azeroth. What Duque had set up, there were 12 evenly distributed small military satellites that were worn outside the planet like a necklace. These military satellites, which were modified from asteroids that Elen had captured, were not connected to the elemental realm, but to the magic net. Thus, the ones who actually controlled the satellites were the heroic spirits of the magic net, led by Khadgar. These military satellites had 360-degree attack capabilities. Long-range frost arrows, arcane beam cannons, flame blast throwers, flaming storm generators. There were all sorts of magical weapons. Moreover, Duque had set up heat absorption spell formations on these satellites that were also nodes of the magic net. They could use the sun's energy to replenish a large amount of fire elements. After being converted by the magic net, they could be used as a semi-permanent source of energy. With the help of the chromatic dragons, large amounts of wreckage of the army's battleships scattered in the orbit of the planet were collected. They were melted at high temperatures to form a layer of alloy armor. Of course, it was not as sturdy as the legendary pure mirror armor. However, with a silver background and a metallic luster around it, the satellites looked like a pearl necklace of the entire planet Azeroth. Moon God's Necklace. Duque used this name to curry favor with his allies. Magical weapons were more efficient in using the elements, but their power and range were not as good. Even the furthest attack weapon had a range of only about 10 kilometers. Even in the face of the Burning Legion's fierce attacks, the satellites had tried their best to intercept them. On the second day, more than 300 assault ships and 100 star destroyers had successfully broken through the defense line formed by the Moon God's Necklace and the chromatic dragons, successfully entering the atmosphere. With regards to this news, Queen Sylvia, who was always looking for the best, was very anxious. Duque had the opposite attitude. Please, we can't build a perfect network on such a large planet. We can't even fit a single starship in. If we want to do that, we need to build a concentric cover larger than planet Azeroth to protect the entire Azeroth. Duque shrugged. Moreover, we've already achieved our goal of chasing the enemy to where we want them to be. There's no need to be too demanding. That's right. Entering the atmosphere did not mean that they could land vertically. Due to the planet's rotation and the resistance of planet Azeroth's atmosphere, the spacecraft would actually fly in a parabola-like arc when they landed. The final destination was already in Duque's calculations. According to the System Elf's calculations, all the Burning Legion spaceships would fall into 6 areas: the Western Wilderness, the Hillsbrad Hills, Tanaris, Azhara, Dan Moro, and the Northern Barrens. Chapter 2003. Anyway, every Alliance soldier felt that it was amazing why the Burning Legion spaceships that were descending on that longitude had to fly in those predestined trajectories. In the case of unsuccessful discussions, they could only attribute the reason to Duque being a powerful god who had mastered spatial magic or something. Duque was a bit bitter. He didn't know how to explain this. This involved a full set of laws of physics. In fact, even Duque himself didn't understand it. Holy sh*t, the system genie had calculated it for him. When Duque turned the system's calculations into trajectories and projected them on the big screens of the various Alliance war zones, there was a commotion in the crowd. Wow, this is really so accurate. Even though Duque had added so much black technology to Azeroth, it wasn't easy to create an ambush circle. In particular, the ambush circle couldn't be too large. Otherwise, according to the communication capabilities of this era, it was very likely that they would lose sight of one thing. No one could guarantee that all kinds of communication would work on the battlefield. Any ambush circle with a diameter of more than 10 kilometers was very easy to get into trouble. On the other hand, to limit the enemy's landing range was also a super technical job. This was beyond the scope of the system. In the entire world, only Duque could do it. None of the demons of the Burning Legion expected that there were still hundreds of flying turrets in the stratosphere of Azeroth. These turrets were often not big. On round stones about 100 meters in diameter, dozens of cannons were installed. Except for a magic cannon similar to the main cannon of the Dalajan 20 years ago, the rest were all anti-aircraft cannons. This made these turrets look even more like hedgehogs. The new magic cannons built by Oder were all controlled by Duque with the system. This was the same as when Duque played the 100-handed Reaper back then. It was an enhanced version of one man is an army. The allies on the ground looked at the scene in the sky that looked like half of the end of the world. It was a long line of fire in the sky like a comet falling to the ground after countless planet destroyers forced their way into the atmosphere. It looked like a meteor, but it wasn't. Just as everyone was silently waiting for the comet to hit the ground, a dazzling purplish-blue light shone in the sky. At first it was a purple light spot, but soon after, every light spot blossomed with a brilliance like that of a star. When the light spots reached their brightest, clusters of light that flew diagonally upward against the meteor shower appeared. So beautiful. In the command center, Sally Whitemane exclaimed. The sky-defying clusters of light were straight, but the zigzagging flying battleships that drew huge arcs in the sky were like moths flying into a flame. It looked like they had actually crashed into the purple light cannons on their own. Bang, 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 bang. In the night sky, countless dazzling flames lit up. The huge meteor suddenly shattered into pieces in the sky, turning into even more scattered and resplendent fragments. From afar it looked like a fireworks display, but everyone knew what it meant. They still remembered the final battle between the Alliance and the Horde 6 years ago. The cannonball of the Alliance's battleships had blown up the Horde's old flying battleship, and the thick parts of the battleship had also turned into scattered petals in the storm. The only difference was that this battle had taken place at an unimaginably high altitude. Anyone with a bit of common sense would know that the further the distance, the greater the error. Perhaps because the hands on the turret had trembled and missed by a millimeter, when the cannonball had flown 10 kilometers away, the error would be more than 100 meters. This kind of unimaginable sniping could only be done by the commander of the Alliance, who wasn't a true god but was stronger than a true god. In the various command centers, the Alliance soldiers were jubilant. Long live the Alliance. Long live Lord Marcus. In fact, if Duque wanted to, he could even destroy this batch of 1,128 army battleships in the atmosphere. But he didn't do that. This wasn't a war for him alone. This was a war for all intelligent beings in the Azeroth. If he alone could take on this war, he didn't mind the Alliance people standing at the side cheering him on. Unfortunately, Kill Jaden would come. Sargeras would come. This time, there was no longer the anti-Titan formation suppressing their strength. When the experts who had stepped into the realm of gods fought against the strongest experts of the army, it was time for the mortals to bear the heavy responsibility of defense. In today's world where technology was changing with each passing day, 5 years was already a generation of soldiers. Many of the veterans who had actual combat experience had become sergeants or even generals. The ones who were going to fight on the front lines were the new recruits with no actual combat experience. Real combat was completely different from the simulated battle that Duque had the Eridar twins drag a group of captured demons with them. New soldiers had to go through trials of blood and fire in order to grow. How to make the recruits grow at a lower cost was the responsibility of every commander who racked their brains to complete it. Duque left about 10 planet destroyers and more than 40 assault ships at each landing point. Rumble. The assault ships landed forcefully, plowing a long trench in the fields of the western wilderness. The planet destroyers were even more anti-biological. They didn't care about the lives of the passengers inside and directly destroyed the planet. Without slowing down at all, they plunged into the ground with a loud bang. The huge bow of the ship, more than 200 meters long, sank into the soil just like that, leaving only a strange ball of light emitting green fluctuations on the body of the ship, constantly flickering. In less than half a minute, the green ball of light suddenly expanded and turned into a 3-story tall portal. Blue-skinned demon guards with giant axes began to rush out one after another. This scene was seen by the magic eyes that had been set up near the predetermined ambush circle. In the western wilderness, Marshal Jirian Antonsman waved his hand in the Death Mine's headquarters under Moon Creek Town. A minute later, the Alliance's counterattack arrived. Not only was there the routine bombardment, but there were also hundreds of flying turrets in the sky. These turrets had a completely different mechanism from the Alliance's warships. They were more like hedgehogs that attracted the demons' firepower. Not only did they have magic cannons and conventional cannons, but they also had extremely heavy armor. Alloy armor that was more than a meter thick was wrapped around the granite, adding a bit of hardness. When the cannons scattered the formation of the demon soldiers, densely packed mechanical creatures began to surround them. Other than the standard track tanks and self-propelled cannons, there were also mechanical beasts equipped with heavy armor, such as the lion type and the spider type. They moved with great agility as if they were real creatures. From afar, they looked like a colony of marching metal ants that were about to devour everything in their path. This was the perfect combination of Odor's mechanical army, the Alliance's tanks and long-range cannons. Chapter 2004. Mechanical gnomes and iron dwarves lacked intelligence, so the Alliance soldiers mixed in with the mechanical army were in charge. As soon as the battle started, sparks flew everywhere. Of course, as the ambushers, the Alliance had an advantage in terms of casualties. With a near-perfect coordination of cannons and infantry, only one mechanical creation would fall for every 10 demons. In the hills of Hillsbrad, Marshal Windsor, who was old but vigorous, was leading the warriors. Having become Duke's retainer, he had been coerced and enticed by Duke to join the ranks of immortals a year ago under the pretext of, for the survival of mankind. Duke controlled the number of people who could obtain eternal life very well. Basically, anyone who was above the rank of lieutenant general would be able to obtain an eternal life spot. Everyone looked at the young and handsome Marshal Windsor in the command seat. Even after a year they still felt very strange. In Tanaris, Brigida Bendis was in charge of the battle. Azhara was Tyron's adopted daughter, the current high priest of the Night Elves, Chandris. In Dan Moreau, Muradin Bronzebeard was naturally in charge. In the barren lands of the north, Varrock Salyafar led 100,000 orcs. Under the cover of the Alliance's cannons and battleships, they cleared the invading demons in an orderly manner. If the Burning Legion still had a boss who was rational enough to control the overall situation, they would realize the problem of the army: many losses, not many results, and they could not open up the situation. Unfortunately, there was none. There were many factions within the Burning Legion. This dog-eat-dog relationship meant that communication would not be smooth. The demons of other races could not wait to see the other races fall. It was fine if they mocked and ridiculed them, but the key was all kinds of concealment and deception. Those with large losses would exaggerate their achievements and then put a bunch of destroyed planet destroyers into the category of medium damage and heavy damage. When they returned, they would shove it to Morgar. If they could not repair it, it meant that the Morgar's skills were not good enough. The news from here was that they had successfully landed and killed 100,000 weak mortals. On the other side it would be 300,000 or 1,000,000. What the hell? Fake reports were everywhere. The most important thing was that the only boss in the army who could control the situation, Kill Jaden, was not in the position of commander. He was preparing to go to the front lines to take revenge for the past. During the Battle of the Sun well back then, a certain honest and reliable young man had caused him to bleed. His lower body was stuck, causing half of his body to explode in the sun well. He almost died. With only half of his body left, he hid in the deepest part of the distorted void and recuperated for 8 years before his body was complete. Then he spent another 2 years to restore his power to its full state. When he came out of the mountain again, he saw the army in a mess. Those troublesome bastards were actually fighting amongst themselves in the warped void. In a fit of rage, the egg destroyed several high-grade Void Dukes and their forces that attempted to break through the defenses of its supporters and kill it. Then, it slowly reorganized its army. Naturally, he placed all the blame on Duque and the 2 Eridar twins who dared to collude with Duque, betray him, and set him up. After confirming the news of the army's return, Gemini had been worried for a long time. She had hinted many times that the physiological structure of Eridar females was no different from that of Drenii. Should they find out more about it? Duque had cheated many people and was afraid that Gemini would poison him in some indescribable place. Thus, he had rejected her many times. Gemini, who felt that her life was hanging by a thread and that she might be sold off by Duque at any time, worked even harder. With the help of these 2 spies, they managed to crack the army's communication channel's password in less than 3 hours after the army's invasion. At this time, a team of 500 people proficient in Eridar's language was nervously monitoring the Burning Legion's communication channel to understand their troop movements. It was these asymmetrical advantages that made up for the difference in military strength between the Burning Legion and the Azeroth Coalition army. This made the battle that the Void Dukes thought could be resolved in 24 hours become a long and endless overtime. Back at the Broken Beach, the battle was one-sided at first. After using the saturation bombardment to wipe out most of the demons on the beach, the Void Dukes could only be dealt with in close combat. While Duque was busy intercepting the army's landing spaceships, Varian gave the order to land. Ghoul, Dan retreated and went to Sargera's tomb to perform the resurrection ritual. The Alliance was actually racing against time. After suppressing the army's demons with the cannons, the Alliance's Marines began to land under the cover of the Naga troops. The battle went smoothly at first. Under the command of the Naga, the Murlocs charged onto the beach. They used spears engraved with holy light runes to deal with the remaining demons. The Lords under Vashj, together with the Hydrothian water elemental counts, attacked the middle and low-level Void Dukes. Even the high-level Lords couldn't survive more than a tenth of Queen Vashj's lightning arrows. The demons that dared to approach the beach were all torn apart and didn't dare to approach. The frigates that had a lower draft and the floating cannons that were flying at a lower altitude pressed forward and used the cannons to kill the demons that were the largest and most durable. Just at this moment, a new enemy appeared. Rumble, It was an old friend that the Alliance wasn't unfamiliar with. Fel Reavers. The great warrior, Varian Rin, who was the commander of the Alliance at that time in history, had sacrificed his life in order to deal with a Fel mech that was clinging onto the Heavenbreaker at the Battle of the Broken Beach. He had no choice but to jump down and kill the Fel mech in order to cover the retreat of the Alliance. It wasn't entirely correct to say that it was the Fel Reavers that killed Varian, but the power of the Fel Reavers was undeniable. The 460mm large-caliber cannons were replaced with armor-piercing cannons. The TNT Holy Light Rune armor-piercing cannons that weighed more than a ton couldn't break through the defense of this terrifying machine that was 20 stories tall and powered by Fel Reavers. The terrifying cannons that could kill humans and animals within 100 meters only left a shallow dent of a few dozen centimeters. Who knew what kind of metal armor this new version of the Fel Reavers used? The Burning Legion, who were at an extreme disadvantage on the battlefield, suddenly moved. Under the cover of the super meat shield, the Fel Reavers, they fiercely pounced into the Alliance's troops that had just landed. They were like a hot knife through butter as they used all kinds of attacks. Eridar Warlock's evil magic. Doomguard's shadow bolts. Cerberus's anti-magic. Originally, there were already hundreds of landing ships on the beach with amphibious tanks. Coupled with Mimirin's mechanical army, more than half of the beach was occupied by the Alliance. The Burning Legion's counterattack immediately had the momentum to chase the Alliance's troops into the sea. Chapter 2005. The Fel Reaver bent its legs, and the jet pack on its back spewed out green demonic flames. 2 seconds later, the gigantic metal body leaped high into the air. With its weight of more than 100 tons, coupled with the acceleration of gravity, when it stomped down, 2 landing ships that were relatively close to each other and had just lowered their shields were instantly trampled into pieces along with the tanks and soldiers on them. It was too fast. There were no screams, only the flesh and blood that shot out from under the Fel Reaver's feet, as well as the aftermath of the engine's explosion. 2 blood-curdling fountains the size of basketball courts were formed. Even though the Fel Reaver's legs sank deep into the soft sand of the beach due to the terrain, it could not offset the shock. Instinctively, the Alliance soldiers on the beach fired even more firepower at the terrifying meat shield-type Fel Reaver. Bang bang bang. The sound of bullets and arrows flying could be heard. In history, Varian was able to chop off the head of a modified Fel Reaver with a single slash, and that was because it was a divine artifact. In essence, the Fel Reaver was not really a high-tech robot. In the end, it was just a dark energy being draped in high-tech armor. Morger stuffed a large amount of mixed demonic energy equivalent to a low-tier Void Lord into the shell of a Fel Reaver. Then, the Void Lord would pick out a sufficiently powerful soul from the captured souls, and stuffed it into the Fel Reaver's intelligence core. As for loyalty? There was no need to think about it. Back in history, Arthas had destroyed many countries and captured countless souls. There were only 2 who did not succumb to Frostmourne soul torture, Uther and Bolvar. The Burning Legion had destroyed countless planets, and many of them were once the souls of powerful enemies. Every race had its heroes, and not every hero had the willpower to persevere in pain and torture for 10,000 years. While the Fel Reaver was few in number as an assault unit, its power was undeniable. At that moment, Duque snapped his fingers. Snap. It was an unusually crisp sound. In that instant, the surrounding generals all thought in a daze that Duke, this fella who wasn't a true deity, yet surpassed a true deity, just a snap of his fingers and half of the Burning Legion's demons would be wiped out. Actually no. Duque snapping his fingers could only mean one thing. The Alliance was going to use their secret weapon. Those who stayed in the Naxxrama's Alliance headquarters were either lieutenants who acted as messengers and monitors, or staff officers with the rank of at least colonel or above. Many generals vaguely knew that the Alliance had a secret research that was like a bottomless pit. Every year, the Alliance spent more than 1 billion gold coins on military expenses and transferred away a large number of recognized outstanding researchers. The importance of this project could be seen from the fact that Master Craftsman Gerben was personally overseeing it. When Duque gave the order, they could finally see the true face of the secret weapon. The Burning Legion immediately noticed that the Alliance's flying fleet in the distance had begun to scatter to the left and right. A huge flying battleship with a grayish-black base color and 2 pairs of crimson wings, one large and one small, charged forward at high speed. The huge bow of the ship had a shape similar to the toe of a war boot. The most shocking thing was its size. The 320-meter-long ship was far longer than the 240-meter-long Bismarck. Such a huge flying battleship was enough to amaze the world. What was even more strange was that it used a different power structure from all the flying battleships in the Alliance. The ship's body constantly glowed, telling those who knew it that this was a battleship powered by pure Titan runes. It was completely outside of the magic net and didn't need any fuel engines. Goddess of Wisdom, Minerva, attack. Please give your orders, Commander. All the more important announcements were made by Sally Whitemane by default. There was no helping it. Dumuk just liked her voice. Perhaps this was what it meant to be a voice actor. Duque smiled at the few images in the magic mirror. Are you ready? Ready? A few voices replied in unison. That's good. On the huge body of the Goddess of Wisdom, 3 large cabin doors that were 10 stories high opened. The Alliance's secret weapon was displayed in front of the world for the first time. Officers and soldiers at the front, retreat immediately. Leave the magic mecha to the Alliance's secret weapon. In the radio communication, the Alliance soldiers were still hot-blooded and fighting to the death. Their duty to carry out orders immediately woke them up and resolutely carried out the orders of their superiors. Duque had been in charge of the Alliance for 20 years. The biggest thing he did was change the Alliance's military system. Orders were absolute. The soldiers immediately covered each other, found cover, and retreated. The magic mecha was also stunned. It sensed a high-energy reaction in the sky not far away. One after another, huge humanoid mechanical creatures were exposed to the sunlight. In particular, the pure gold metal robot in the lead won the cheers of the entire fleet. The soldiers on the surrounding warships all whistled. Praise the holy light. It looked like that robot was a large silver hand knight. Gold eagle head flying wing pauldrons, gold-edged silver arm guards, gold triangular chest armor, standard silver hand shield, all the parts that needed to be moved were silver scales. Other than the fact that the knight was holding a large ashbringer that was more than 12 meters long and 21 meters tall, he looked like a fully armed version of Tyrion Fordring with a closed helmet and a mask over his face. On the other side there was a giant paladin robot with a similar appearance. It was covered in purple-blue paint, which told everyone who the owner of this mecha was. Needless to say, it was the rare mutant Thunder Knight Gavinrad Misfortune of the Silver Hand. As for the one in the middle, there was a metal giant with 2 swords on its back, a belt with a lion emblem, and a helmet decorated with a wolf head. 3 voices sounded in the Alliance's command center. Tyrion Fordring Holy Light Gundam, attack. Gavinrad Misfortune Gundam of Misfortune, attack. Varian Rin Wolf God Gundam, attack. Gundam, the common dream of boys and men, had finally been magically modified by Du and Azeroth. Strictly speaking, these Gundams were not robots, because their mechanism had nothing to do with machinery or science. In standard terms, these were just giant exoskeleton mechas that were driven by the Titan Rune magic circle and could 100% synchronize with the pilot's movements. With the mecha, would the heroes still need to fight the huge monsters of the Burning Legion with their flesh and blood? The Wolf God Gundam was attached to Varian's body. With a thought, with the help of the catapult, the thrusters on its back spewed out surging Titan fire. The 30-ton mecha was like a light tank that had been shot out by a huge cannon. It suddenly broke through the sky and crossed 5 kilometers in just a few seconds, descending on the head of the magic mecha. Chapter 2006. In the cockpit, William's armor was suspended by a movable bracket. The Wolf Deity Gundam mimicked William's movements and made the same strike. At the bottom of the metal saws, Titan energy shot out from the 12 round holes, producing a violent propulsion and acceleration effect. The mechanical arm, which was made of flexible metal that imitated the muscles of an arm, swung the giant beheading sword in the mech's hand and made a fierce slash that was as heavy as Mount Tai. The giant metal sword, which was exactly the same as William's artifact, Salamani, cut through the void and slashed at the back of the head of the Fell Reaver, which was obviously slower. Crack. The loud sound was like a shot of adrenaline in the ears of the Alliance soldiers. Half of the Fell Reaver's head had completely caved in. Although the Alliance's Gundam was only 1/3 of the Fell Reaver's height, it still looked like an adult fighting a child. Compared to the original version of history, where William was forced to fight such a huge monster with his own body, the situation was much better. The Alliance's Gundam was only inferior in size. Its speed, agility, destructive power, and even strength were much stronger. The metallic mouth of the Fell Reaver that had its head chopped off by William's Gundam opened and closed silently, as though it was about to let out a painful scream. A large amount of dark energy burst out in the form of a green slurry, splashing everywhere. It was obvious that it wanted to drag the Wolf Deity Gundam down with it as it headed towards William's direction. William did not care about this useless scum. He nimbly tapped the Wolf Deity Gundam on the Fel Reaver's chest armor. With the jetpack's ejection, the 7-story-tall Gundam swept past the Fel Reaver like a rock spreading its wings. The Gundam's size might not be able to win against the Fel Reaver, and it was afraid of a competition of pure strength. But compared to other demons that were also huge in size, the Gundam was taller. In William, beating up the Doomsday Guards that only reached the Wolf Deity Gundam's chest was exhilarating. On the other side, Gavin Rad's Bad Luck Gundam also began to charge forward. He ejected from the flight deck, and his first target was the back of an Abyssal Lord. The Abyssal Lord's bloated body, thick waist, and peculiar body structure meant that it was useless against attacks from the back. In fact, this race had always been used as a sharp knife for charging. Attacks from the back? In theory, that was the responsibility of the other demons. However, under the effect of gravity, the 35-ton Misfortune Gundam itself was the most terrifying weapon. High Misfortune's legs sank deep into the Abyssal Lord's back, and a terrifying force that could crush a reinforced concrete fortress was concentrated on the relatively narrow metal soles of its feet. Pooh! With a shocking explosion, the Lord of the Abyss's dragon-shaped lower body turned into a crushed tomato. The stinky internal organs and bones turned into shockwaves of flesh and blood when they exploded. Theon's Holy Light Gundam was the most orthodox of attacks. The Golden Giant raised the silver palm emblem shield with its left arm and charged forward with a ferocious shield bash, blocking the mechanical arm of the other Fel Reaver. At the same time, Ashen Messenger, who had been hiding behind the shield before charging over, slashed horizontally from left to right, deeply cutting open the Fel Reaver's abdomen armor. After landing, the Holy Light Gundam mimicked Theon's movements in the cockpit. It lunged forward, turned right on the tip of its left foot, and swung its left arm violently for a second shield bash. Because of its height, the attack still hit the Fel Reaver's abdomen armor. However, unlike the other two Gundams, the shield shone with a brilliant golden light, like the rising sun. Wow, Her Majesty is showing her power. Ever since Duque let his mouth slip, Gavin Rad, who had a loose tongue, also called Theon Her Majesty, like Duque did. Theon you. This was King Was praise. That's right. Most of the time, the Alliance version of the Gundam was just a piece of armor that made its movements bigger. If it needed long-range attacks or energy output, it could also insert the weapon in its hand into a special slot to enhance its attack power. After all three of them were wielders of divine artifacts. By the way, Gavin Rad's Wind Sword was still the Wind Sword. After Queen Sylvan released Prince Thunderin as her subordinate, she placed the soul fragment of his father Alakir into it. Its power was still the same. Theon's, Ashbringer, was already the strongest holy light amplification device. Suddenly, the holy light burst forth and hit the metal shield like a light cannon. The holy light that was enough to blow up the body of a low-tier Void Lord was condensed into a 2-meter diameter light beam. Then it aimed at the wound created by the large Ashbringer. Boom. The Fel Reaver's body was directly pierced through. Under the powerful impact, the huge Fel Reaver curled up like a cooked shrimp. In the blink of an eye, its mountain-like body flew straight up into the sky like a home run in a baseball. It flew straight up to a height of 100 meters before losing its momentum and falling in a parabola. Boom. The heavy body flew to the gravel by the beach and exploded like a shockwave. Sand and gravel flew everywhere. Oh! The Alliance soldiers cheered in amazement. That was not the end. The Golden Gundam leaped high into the air and used the force of the jump to crush the Fel Reaver's head. Poof! The dark power liquid splattered everywhere. It was like the final cry of this huge creature made of dark power. The Fel Reaver's limbs lost power and collapsed into the gravel and mud. Oh! Long live the Alliance. Without needing anyone to say anything, the Alliance soldiers who had been holding back immediately charged again. With the 3 Gundams as the arrowhead, the Alliance successfully established their first beachhead in about an hour. Of course, this temporary base built with 88mm cannons and diesel tanks as the main firepower was still too weak in front of the Demon Army. In history, in order to fight for the control of strategic locations on the Broken Beach and even the entire Broken Islands, the Alliance and the Horde almost shed their last drop of blood. The problem was that before the war started, there was no way to enter this area to set up a defense, which made the Alliance and the Horde look more like invaders. Since the commander was changed to Duque, and there was no longer any hindrance from the Horde, Duque, who knew about all this, naturally had a new response. Under the cover of tens of thousands of airships and fleets on the sea, the two islands began to slowly cruise toward the broken beach. One of the islands was not unfamiliar to everyone. It was one of the Pandurans' nests, Shensi. Chapter 2007. Duque persuaded Old Qin and Xiaohao to let Shenzhen take the risk to participate in the first wave of attack, provided that the alliance successfully controlled the beachhead. The Pandaren didn't want his old friend to take the risk, but this was a war involving all the creatures in Azeroth. Even the always kind turtle couldn't stay out of it. Therefore, Shenzhen's huge turtle back was full of the alliance's mechanized troops. 2 full assault tank divisions were the alliance's killing machine to attack the Burning Legion's position. Almost as soon as Shenzhen approached the broken beach and sent out a signal that he couldn't get any closer, the alliance's engineers quickly put down the trestle that had been prepared in advance and put it on Shenzhen's back all the way to the beach. Tens of thousands of mechanized troops marched on the broken beach. Their participation directly suppressed the Burning Legion's counterattack. A large number of armored troops, under the cover of the flying fleet in front, occupied the entire broken beach in just 12 hours. This laid a firm foundation for the arrival of the second island. It was a mobile fortress fixed on more than 11,000 pontoons and floating cabins, covering an area of more than 1 square kilometer. Its shape was an octagonal fort up to 9 stories high, and now only had a reinforced concrete foundation structure. Even if the unnecessary structure was repeatedly cut, the total weight still exceeded 36,000 tons. Yes, the Alliance did have flying fortresses like Naxxramas and the Dalajan. But in a supermodern war, the importance of strongholds was self-evident. Naxxramas, which didn't land, was like the sword of Damocles hanging high above the heads of the demons. Moreover, the flying fortresses also undertook the task of mobile support, so it was best not to use the 2 ready-made flying fortresses as the military fulcrum of the Broken Islands. In history, after the Third Dark Portal, the courageous Dalaran had acted as the forward base in every war, from the world of ice and snow in Northrend to the Broken Archipelago. In this life, Dubois had changed history significantly, so the Dalajan had to bear much less pressure. After the Dalajan moved to the west side of the broken beach to act as a barrier, blocking the counterattack of the Flying Apocalypse Guard army, Naxxramas began to help transport the mobile fortress to the broken beach. More than 18,000 steel cables hung from the square Naxxramas, and after fixing the cables, they almost hoisted the entire mobile stronghold. It was said to be almost, because among the 4 major elemental realms, the Earth Elemental Realm, the only one that did not undertake the task of outer atmosphere defense, had undertaken this advancement. The children and servants of the Stone Mother, Therazane, commanded over 10,000 Earth Elementals. They used their sturdy and powerful arms to carry the entire mobile fortress from the shallow waters to the shore. The Earth Elemental Army cast their unique Earth magic and flattened the uneven ground on the broken beach in just an hour. The huge fortress came crashing down. Place the prefabricated steel column in the reserved cavity and pour cement over it to seal it. Like a swarm of ants, a large number of carriers on the sea and in the air swarmed to the fortress and covered the fortress with a metal deck and magic protection. Normally speaking, it wouldn't be strange for such a massive fort to take 10 years to build in the olden era. But with the help of Duque's modern management methods, black technology, and the extremely magical Earth Elemental Army, the fortress was formed in just 3 days. The Alliance officially named this forward operating base as Fort Courage. That's right. It really took courage to fight against the endless demons of the Burning Legion with a mortal body. Now it seemed that the entire Alliance did a better job than everyone thought. Sal stood on the side of a 230-meter-long flying battleship and looked at the majestic city 2 kilometers away that seemed to be changing every moment. He felt a lot of emotions. Did you see that? Old friend, I have imagined countless times, if I had suppressed the opposition in the tribe and did not hand over the authority to Gurus, would the tribe still exist? Obviously the answer is no. Wajin came over and glanced at the Frost Wolf flying ship that the Alliance had specially built for Sal, and he also felt emotional. The incomparably majestic flying battleship was equipped with the Alliance's ultimate 460mm cannon, as well as the latest Eagle Strike missiles. Unfortunately, the Orcs had a natural weakness when it came to operating high-tech weapons. Sal had put in a lot of effort to force this group of guys who would rather charge at the demons with axes and die to receive new knowledge and new weapons. Wajin secretly sighed and said, "The era of the Horde ended 6 years ago. As long as we survive this battle, Azeroth will usher in the era of the Grand Alliance. If we don't want to be destroyed, We should take advantage of the other side's goodwill and become a part of them. I never thought that our decision to join the alliance was a mistake. Yes. Sal had infinite emotions. The battle between the alliance and the Burning Legion continued. The broken islands in the middle of the endless Sea of Azeroth had several huge areas. The alliance was able to obtain a strategic fulcrum on the Broken Beach, which was the lowest altitude and the most convenient to occupy. This was undoubtedly a very gratifying step. With this courage fortress that originally did not exist in history, the alliance could unscrupulously set up artillery positions in the Broken Beach area. Because of the increasing terrain restrictions of the Broken Islands, the artillery range of the ships on the sea would be greatly affected. This kind of fixed artillery position that could use 800mm railway guns was the favorite of artillerymen. With the initial success of the war, there was also a voice within the alliance. The demons of the Burning Legion are nothing more than this. Counterattack. The alliance should counterattack into the Twisted Nether and hit the Legion's nest. Most of the people who said this were low-level staff officers who had a good background or family education, had just graduated from military academies, and had a higher starting point than ordinary soldiers. Of course, there were also a few soldiers who took the lead. For this kind of brainless idiot who fooled their own people and encouraged more people to follow them to die, there were too many of them. For example, in World War I, when the British Army first saw machine guns, the brainless British commander felt that he did not send enough soldiers. As a result, he sent more soldiers to die in an attempt to use up the enemy's machine gun bullets with their flesh and blood. For this kind of idiot, Duque directly transferred all the guys who talked nonsense to the Broken Beach front line. Within 3 days, more than half of these idiots died and then they fell silent. The defending side would always be on the passive side. When the Burning Legion found that the hard bone of Azeroth was as difficult to bite as ever, the entire Legion began to adjust. Chapter 2008. Although it was a dog-eat-dog situation within the army, there were not many truly stupid Void Lords. Those with a bad brain would either be so powerful that they could ignore all plots and schemes, or they would have long since been devoured by the other lords without leaving even their bones behind. After the Burning Legion began to adjust their strategy, the Alliance did not have an easy time. The most obvious was that the Void fleet of the army began to use bait. Tens of thousands of modified spaceships that looked like planet destroyers began to attack the defense line in Azeroth. These bait ships had been modified by the MORG demon technicians. Be it the spaceship signal or the appearance, they were extremely realistic. This greatly consumed the energy of the 5-color dragons and highly intelligent fire, wind, and water elemental creatures. The enemy spaceships that broke into the atmosphere were not limited to the 6 ambush circles. Even though Duque was prepared and even deployed some of the spaceships to the rear when the front did not need so many spaceships. 36 air fleets with more than 1,000 warships were patrolling the 4 continents, but they still felt exhausted. At the same time, on the Broken Islands, the Alliance's advancement to Asuna, Surima, and Storm Fjord was not going well. More fell mechs and Lords of the Abyss appeared on the battlefield. These thick-skinned mechanical creations and great demons were a destructive blow to the ordinary Alliance troops. There were more than 3 Gundams. Duque had customized one for every powerhouse in the Alliance who had reached the hero realm. Only these powerhouses who stood at the top of the Alliance in terms of reflexes and physical fitness could unleash the maximum combat power of the Gundams. As for the rest, due to the shortage of high-strength metal resources and the production capacity of the Mimiron workshop, the Alliance really did not have the ability to make more Gundams. However, Duque was already considering promoting a cheaper version of the Gundam, Jim. It was a huge mech that even the elite professions in the Alliance could use, mainly to deal with the Apocalypse Guards that were too large in size. On the 7th day of the war, in order to speed up the destruction of the descending planet destroyers, the Alliance finally began to send the God of the Wilderness, Archavon, and the ancient dragons that were transferred back from the Void battlefield to Azeroth, such as Krasis, who should have died long ago. The effective training had long been achieved. However, the fatigue of the soldiers was increasing, and the battle losses were also rising. The more planet destroyers there were, the more army portals opened in Azeroth. Quantitative change could lead to qualitative change. If he didn't want the pressure to accumulate and eventually become the straw that broke the camel's back, he had to reduce the pressure in advance. I don't believe that the Burning Legion's planet destroyer battleships are infinite. Looking at the damage reports flying towards him, Duque cursed in his heart. War was like two ferocious beasts tearing each other apart. If the difference in strength was not enough to kill the other in one blow, then it was very likely to become an endless overtime. Either one of them couldn't take it anymore and was killed by the other, and then devoured until not even their bones were left, or both of them were so exhausted that they couldn't fight anymore. Then they silently shook hands and went back to lick their wounds before fighting again. Just when the battle was at its most stalemate, the first piece of good news finally arrived. Taurine contacted Duque excitedly. "Duque, we found Odin." When Duque heard the news, he pretended to be happy and didn't lose a polite smile. Putting aside the fact that this world was also filled with Norse gods on Earth, Duke was already doing them a favor by not creating a Lord Kratos. Just talking about Odin didn't interest Duque at all. That's right, at this point in time Odin would jump out. 1. The owner of the Sky Fortress, the Warrior's Artifact Hall, in the World of Warcraft game. 2. The final boss of the 5-man instance dungeon Valhalla. 3. The first boss of the Trial of Courage group dungeon. 25,000 years ago, as the most powerful and bravest guardian, Odin was appointed as the chief manager by the Titans. He had the authority to summon Olga to solemnly create Azeroth. While the Guardians were promoting the ceremony to grant the dragon aspects power, Odin was alone in the Hall of Ojua, deep in thought. His colleagues' disobedience to him, the commander-in-chief, made him furious. But what made him even angrier was that he was certain that the dragon aspects would fail to protect the world. To prevent Azeroth from falling to such a state, Odin decided to take care of everything himself. He wanted to create an elite army according to his wishes, an army that could listen to his commands and protect the world when Azeroth was in dire need. And in order to obtain the soldiers of this army, Odin set his sights on the powerful Vrykul. He had always been fond of the Vrykul's innate courage and strength. In Odin's eyes, the Vrykul's warrior soul was incomparable to any other Titan creation. Tyr, the king of order, and the other guardians returned to Ojua and asked Odin to give up this stupid plan, but Odin was unmoved. He was stubborn and believed in his own correctness, but when he invited the other guardians to help him build the army, no one offered a helping hand. Odin expressed that even if he was the only one, he was determined to complete this army. This was why when Duque and the others first attacked Ojua, the guardians said that Odin was missing. In fact, Odin had chosen a side hall of Ojua as the base of his army. After that, in order to separate it from the entire fortress, and even more so from the other guardians, Odin found a witch, Herja, a creation of the Titans that Odin had treated as his goddaughter for a long time. Thus, Herja weaved a powerful spell and enveloped all the strongholds chosen by the guardians. Then, she used all her strength to tear the group of halls that originally belonged to Ojua from the ground and rose straight into the clouds in the sky. Since then, the floating city's reputation as the Hall of Valhalla spread throughout the world. Odin occupied the top of the fortress and loudly announced his intentions to all the Vrykul. Those who died heroically and gloriously on the battlefield would be able to be reborn in the Hall of Valhalla, and the bodies obtained by their souls would be forged by an even more powerful storm. These warriors, these Verigars would be the top guardians of Azeroth, and their achievements would forever be remembered in the hearts of all Titan creations. Now what was lacking was a way to send souls to the Hall of Valhalla. For this, Odin studied the energy dissipated in the Kingdom of Shadows, and thus mastered the method to transform some of the Vrykul into spirits. This was the method to create Verigar. Chapter 2009. These Vagri were spectral servants that could travel between the nation of shadows and the real world, and were used to guide the soul of Vrykul to the Valhalla. However, if they became Vagri, it meant that they would have to bear the curse of being an illusion for all eternity. But no Vrykul was willing to sacrifice themselves to become Vagri, so Odin decided to take action by force and turn the Titan creation into a slave. However, this incurred Herja's rebuke. The dispute between the two grew increasingly intense, and the enraged Odin almost fought with Herja. In the end, Herja could only warn Odin that if he was still stubborn, she would return the Valhalla to Odin. To Odin, Herja's disobedience did not only threaten his plan, but also the safety of all of Azeroth. Odin, who had been overwhelmed by the fantasy of the Martyr's Palace, extended his hand towards the witch. Odin first shattered her physical form, then twisted her soul. Thus, the first Vagri in history was born. For a time, Herja's cries of pain and anger rumbled across the land of Azeroth, resounding straight into the center of the Nation of Shadows. This violent transformation caused Herja to be eternally depressed, but her suffering did not end there. Even though she hated Odin for his actions, she could not go against his will. Thus, under the latter's orders, many Vrykul who had no intention of doing so were turned into the cursed Vagri. For a long time, Herya and her Vagri colleagues led the heroic soul of Vrykul to the Valhalla, and the storm-infused Vareyr could be seen everywhere in the walled city. And it was Odin himself who gave them power and guided their training. Whether it was breaking off with the Guardians or turning Herya into Vagri, he never felt the slightest bit of regret. To Odin, everything he did was for the safety of Azeroth, and to pay his utmost respect to the great pantheon. Well, that's right. Odin of Azeroth was similar to the god King Odin that Duque knew from Norse mythology on Earth. They were both rather annoying. I don't want to give a **T about him. If there was something, she would try to ignore him if she could. Duque even had a feeling that if he could deal with the Burning Legion, he might even have to go to war with this fellow. Based on the current situation, this guy's strength was still indispensable. This was because his existence represented assistance from the Pantheon Temple, and it was also the sign of the era of picking up divine artifacts anywhere. The opening of a new hall for all professions was the key to upgrading the divine equipment. However, Duque rolled his eyes at the god of thunder. Tarim, we've known each other for so long. Don't you have anything to say to me? Tarim, who had never learned how to shrink, always maintained his giant form. He touched his big nose awkwardly. How much do you know? A lot. Mimiron told me of Odin. But I still want to hear your version. A person who played with lightning could easily become a straightforward person after a long period of time. Queen, she did not count. Her job was to be the wind. Although Tarim was embarrassed, he still confessed a lot of things. Basically, he knew almost the same as what Duque knew. Finally, he concluded, although we Guardians have had unpleasant experiences working with Odin in the past, Odin will not be careless in the face of a great enemy like the Burning Legion. He is still a Guardian at heart. Duque pretended to think for a while, then called William over. William, I have a mission for you. After hearing this, William was a little speechless. Uncle Duque, isn't it better for you to do this kind of thing? Odin is the chief of the Guardians, right? Duque shrugged. Odin is straightforward and doesn't like to work with others, let alone listen to others' commands in battle. And I heard from Tarim that he is a pure warrior. He will probably get along better with you as a warrior. William was middle-aged and still a little hot-tempered. This had a lot to do with the fact that he had fused with Goldrin's soul fragment, which was equivalent to half a wolf god. But after being in a high position for a long time, he had also matured. He immediately sensed that Duque had a strange dislike or perhaps resentment towards Odin, so William did not pursue the matter. After knowing Duque for 30 years, he also understood his temper. If he did not say anything, no one could force him. Then, what if Odin asks why you didn't come? What will you say? Duque rolled his eyes. Just say that because the highest guardian of Odin disappeared, I was busy cleaning up the mess of those unreliable Pentashade dragons. I was busy intercepting the Burning Legion starships in the void battlefield and could not leave. Hearing this, Tarim and William both choked. After going around in circles, wasn't he still scolding Odin? Was this Odin's fault? Duque was really mean. Tarim's face turned red too. In the beginning, it was Odin who insisted on giving power to the dragon aspects. In the end, it was the dragon aspects and the Pentashade dragons who shouldered the responsibility of protecting this world for 25,000 years. On the surface, it seemed like the Pentashade dragons were unreliable, but everyone knew that the dragon aspects could not have done better in the consecutive battles, including the Cataclysm. Duque was obviously belittling the Dragon Slumber Shrine and trampling on Odin. Tarim glanced at William, who understood tacitly and returned a look. I understand, I'll just say the second half of what Duque said. No one knew that Duque had an even deeper grudge. What the hell, why was it that in The Return of the Legion, the warrior class hall was ascending to the heavens, while the other class halls were entering? The warriors were like immortals ascending, flying to the firmament shrine. When they turned back, they all looked like comets falling to the ground. They had the aura of a deity descending to the mortal world. Compared to the warrior profession hall, the other profession halls were at least one level lower. Duque also understood that the profession hall had to be in line with the identity of the profession, but the difference in quality was too great. The Guardian Temple of the Mages and the Chapel of the Holy Light for the Paladins were still passable. The pitiful bandits had to go to the sewers, and the Warlock Hall affected the appearance of the city. However, the warlocks and bandits had little to do with Duque. After deciding that William would appear, the rest was to set it up. Tarim continued to narrate the story. We, the Guardians, knew that Odin and his adopted daughter, Hela, had been at odds for a long time, but due to Odin's authority, Hela did not immediately take revenge until the traitorous guardian Loken found Hela. Hela created the underworld abyss not far from the Hall of Heroes and used all the means she could think of to take revenge on Odin. Hela's kingdom controlled the souls of the weak, and through a series of actions such as the creation of Kvarder and the formation of the elite Helagar, they fought against Odin's subordinate, Wagri. Chapter 2010. Tarim continued, ever since Loken's betrayal, Odin has been imprisoned in the Hall of Heroes. Hela has been plotting in the shadows to seize the soul of his Varigar warriors. But recently we received a message from Odin again. Odin is gathering mortal warriors for a final test, hoping that their strength and determination can turn the situation around and end Hela's rule. The underworld purgatory is only the first step of Hela's plot. She intends to eradicate Odin and obtain the soul of the Varigar warriors. So, our mission this time is not only to rescue Odin but also to defeat Hela. At this moment, Duque interrupted. This mission is very important because Mimiron told me that Odin seems to have a special way of charging divine weapons that can allow most weapons with divine weapon quality to be charged and upgraded to a higher level of divine weapons. I think this will greatly strengthen the combat power of the professionals in the Alliance. At this point, Varian's eyes lit up shockingly. Duque had long predicted an era where divine weapons were everywhere. Back then, Duque had analyzed it from the perspective of star souls. Things like, I've read all the ancient books in Karazhan and discovered that when a planet's star soul was destroyed by the Burning Legion, it even made a powerhouse who had just stepped into the hero realm become a true god. Although these theories made everyone feel good, deep down they still did not believe them. If it was not Duque who came up with this theory, it would most likely be taken as boasting. Divine weapons were everywhere and purple equipment was not even comparable to dogs. Would such a good thing really exist? When this day was about to come, it was actually quite exciting. How could one or two divine weapons be enough? Who did not want to have a full set of divine weapons? Looking at the excited Varian, Duque's mouth twitched. Although he was already a demigod, he could not avoid it. Mages and demigods were extremely powerful, but in contrast, the physique of mages was so weak that they were even weaker than ordinary hero warriors. Back then, Medivh as a demigod mage had also died. As long as one did not activate a magic shield or magic armor, and remove the elemental transformation in one's body, stabbing a demigod mage to death would be a piece of cake. How could they be like the thick-skinned defense warriors, who could still jump around like pigs after being shot? Mages were a contradictory combination of extreme power and unimaginable fragility. However, William was enough to deal with Odin. Duque couldn't be bothered to play the game of allies with Odin, who was a little crazy. Time passed quickly. The allied forces formed by the Alliance and the Guardians formed a tug-of-war with the Burning Legion. The army began to work hard to prevent the assault ships and planet destroyers from entering the Alliance's encirclement. This increased the pressure on the two geosynchronous satellite fortresses on the Void battlefield. Overall, the number of demonic warships entering Azeroth had decreased in late April, but they had spread more widely. Even when Duque had sent out half of the reserve fleet that he had been holding back, to split the Alliance's starships into 36 fleets, it still felt like a mess. The demons charged at the Alliance without any regard for their lives. The Alliance had to pay a heavy price for every meter they advanced on the Broken Islands. By the middle of April, the number of Alliance soldiers dying in battle had exceeded 10,000. By the end of the month, the number had risen to 30,000. On April 22nd, more than 500,000 Alliance soldiers had died since the start of the war. And at this moment, Duque suddenly felt his heart palpitate. He was in the command center of Naxxramas and Duque was dreaming. There was only one being in the entire world that could make a demigod daydream and forcibly pull his soul into a dream for a short period of time, the Dragon King of the Emerald Dream, Isra. Isra's usually soft voice had a rare hint of anxiety. Duque, something's wrong. The Emerald Dream has been contaminated by an unknown force. Even Cenarius is not normal. Come and help me, you're the only one in this world who can help me. Duque shuddered. Wait, isn't the King of Nightmares Savi's dead? No, it doesn't look like Savi's. I'm very familiar with his soul and the waves of the dream. In the dream, the human form of Isra bit his lips, his face even twitching slightly in pain. Don't pull my spirit. I need to go back and confirm something. Give me 5 minutes. Okay. The next moment, the scene in front of him suddenly receded like the tide. A stream of light flashed, and Duque found himself sitting in the command seat again. Duque, Duque, what's wrong? Jaina was the most anxious. I'm fine, but something has happened to the Emerald Dream. Isra just asked me for help. Duque's words shocked the surrounding alliance bigwigs. With doubts, Duque opened his right hand and took out a divine artifact from the space he had condensed with his own power, the Tear of Elune. Duque narrowed his eyes. Something was wrong. If this was the original history, the King of Nightmares Savis, who should have died and been revived again and again, once again using nightmares to contaminate the Emerald Dream. Many druids were corrupted by the nightmares, and even Cenarius could not escape the corruption. Malfurion Stormrage had lost his mind because Cenarius had been corrupted by the King of Nightmares Savis, so he went after Savis alone. Isra was worried about Malfurion's safety and followed closely behind. However, everything was a trap set by Savis. Savis caught Malfurion and used the corrupted divine artifact, the Tear of Elune, to hit Isra, who was rushing over. The corrupted Tear of Elune entered Isra's body and corrupted him. Then, Savis took Malfurion away and allowed the corrupted Isra to destroy the Moon Temple. Tyrant Whisperwind, who arrived late, had a difficult choice to stop the corrupted Isra first and save Malfurion later. With the help of a group of mortal heroes, the corrupted Isra was defeated. Before he died, the moon emitted a beautiful light like a miracle and took away Isra's soul. Thus, the dragon aspect Isra had fallen. Unlike the annoying Maligos and the arrogant Nozdormu, Isra had always been a positive character. As a dragon girl, she was very popular among the players. During the Return of the Legion period, Isra's death made countless players sad. After knowing each other for so many years, Duque had saved so many people and changed the fates of so many people who were supposed to die. He had even saved Nozdormu, so of course he would not leave Isra behind. He had beaten the crap out of Savis in advance and destroyed his soul. He had even persuaded Elune to let Isra give him the Tear of Elune. It could be said that under normal circumstances, there was no possibility of Isra being corrupted again. What the hell was going on in the Emerald Dream? What was going on? Chapter 2011. Magni. I have an important mission for you. With that, Duque handed the Tear of Elune to Magni Bronzebeard, who was glowing with a blinding diamond light. I'm going to the Emerald Dream. During this time, keep it safe for me. The Tear of Elune, one of the pillars of creation, cannot be lost. Magni stretched out his hand and took the artifact. As soon as he closed his sparkling diamond palm, everyone could see that his diamond arm had become almost transparent. The red solid artifact teardrop had actually passed through his arm and reached his heart. The big shots were dumbfounded. Magni's gaze swept across everyone. I'm sorry. I'm just a demigod of the earth. I'm not like a certain demigod of the elements and a certain goddess of the wind, who can still act like humans even after stepping into the divine realm. Everyone burst into laughter. Queen Sylvanas connected telepathically. Duque, I know. Duque, of course, knew that there must be a reason behind this anomaly. If it was just a routine attack, Duque wouldn't be afraid at all. However, this inexplicable attack was a bit of a headache. The history of Azeroth had long been riddled with holes by Duque. Some events, rather than fate, were more like the same choices that a certain leader with a fixed personality would definitely make at a fixed point in time. However, many events had already become untraceable. For example, Onyxia should have been dead long ago. She would at most turn into a zombie once before completely disappearing from the stage of history. Who knew that she would still be fighting in the void battlefield with the title of a dragon aspect? Another example would be William. At this point in time, William should be dead as well. However, with Duque's command, William had directly escaped death at the Shattered Beach. He was still the core and soul of the Alliance. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be a card like King of Nightmares, Savis. This was different from Enzos's previous strategy. It was equivalent to a direct attack now. If it was in the game, Emerald Nightmare would only be a transitional dungeon. Those who needed to beat people up and those who needed to push the boss pushed the boss. Apart from countless players cursing the glass scum for killing our beautiful Isra, the Jade Nightmare was no different from other group dungeons. The Azeroth in the real world had a completely different significance to the Emerald Dream. The Emerald Dream was originally the blueprint of the Azeroth created by the Titans, but now, under the stimulation of the mysterious power of the unknown origin, the spreading corruption was now gushing out. If it could not be stopped at its source, the entire Azeroth would be surrounded by it. Duque knew very well what would happen if the Emerald Dream turned into an Emerald Nightmare. When the nightmare expanded infinitely, all the mortals in Azeroth would be trapped by it. They would pass out on the floor and have nightmares. What would happen if the Burning Legion's invasion was like a raging fire, and all the Alliance soldiers of the Resistance Legion fell asleep from nightmares at the same time? Team wipe. Big brother. Needless to say, only by defeating the one who was the source of the corruption in the Emerald Dream would they be able to see the pure Emerald Dream again. If the other Alliance powerhouses went, they would have to work twice as hard for half the results. Their background meant that they had limited knowledge. When it came to knowledge, no one could compare to a transmigrator from the Great Celestial Empire. Duke had arranged the work on the front line. After handing over most of the task of remotely controlling the Void Fortress above the atmosphere to Khadgar and the other elemental emissaries, he directly lay down in his bedroom in Naxxramas's commander's mansion. He ordered his handmaidens Vanessa and Solarian, "I'll probably have nightmares and scream. As long as I don't wantonly attack the surrounding Alliance leaders, don't worry even if I tear down the commander's mansion." Vanessa was a little troubled. "Then when I sleep, don't let anything near me, not even my wives. Because in terms of power, the spirit can actually be unified with the material. When the spirit is completely materialized, the enemy can also become someone by my side." With her voice and smile, Duque emphasized, even though he thought that he might be thinking too much. It was better to be safe than sorry. Ever since he had transmigrated, he had persevered for so many years and he was just one step away. No matter what, he could not fail at this time of the army's return. Duque arranged everything, laid down comfortably and called out softly, "Isra." Almost in the next moment he felt as if his spirit had encountered a black hole, and a great suction force came from the illusion, about to pull his soul out of his divine body. Of course, if Duque wanted to resist, the other party would definitely not succeed. A demigod against a demigod would at most be a distraction. After verifying that it was Isra himself and that he was not corroded, Duque let go of his spirit, allowing Isra to pull his soul. In the blink of an eye, Duque found himself in a strange, blurry and terrifying world. The sky was red, but it was covered in a thick layer of dust. Countless buildings in the distance, as well as the huge land below, were lifted into the air by huge vines. Once upon a time, the Emerald Dream was a vibrant green. Even though there were all kinds of unreal illusions, it was always filled with a beautiful feeling. It was as if as long as he closed his eyes, he could sit in all kinds of beautiful dreams and soar in an absolutely perfect world. Now all that came to his nose was a rotten smell, like a piece of fat pork that was bought and thrown in a corner for a week, emitting the kind of rotten smell that cockroaches and mice loved. Ugh. It was just a feeling, but Duque felt like retching. "Duque, you promised me 5 minutes. Isra's soft voice came. Duque turned around embarrassed and then got a shock. Old friends. Whether it was her dragon form or her night elf form, Isra always gave people a feeling of elegance and beauty. But the Isra that appeared in front of Duque was extremely weak. The Isra in her night elf form couldn't even stand steadily. Half of her body was leaning on a withered blood-red vine. Night elves always dressed boldly. Most female elves liked to not wear armor between their breastplate and belt, because it made it lighter and allowed their skin to feel the power of the moon goddess. But the Isra at this moment, the right side of her exposed waist was like a tattoo of the worst kind. It was like using the worst heavy metal paint to pierce into the dermis, leaving a color of corrosion on it. "Damn, why didn't you call me earlier?" "I did. I thought of you the moment I got hit. This is, about 8 minutes in the real world." Isra smiled bitterly. But that smile was uglier than crying. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.